of the Chatham County Savannah Metropolitan Planning Commission will now come to order. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
We thank you, O Lord, for the good weather that we're having around this area. We thank you for all the many blessings that we receive daily, even though we're probably not entitled. We hope that everybody had a happy Mother's Day. Help us, O God, to make clear and honest decisions, not biased, but humble. We ask you to look on our service men and women serving all over the country for our benefit. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. There is a sign-in sheet at the door to the hearing room. Please sign this sheet to record your attendance at today's meeting. For those of you who would like to speak, we ask that you sign one of our blue speaker cards. Give the blue speaker card to a staff member at the front tables so we can call your name at the appropriate time. There are agendas on the table outside near the door to the hearing room. Today's agenda is broken down into several parts. First, notices, proclamations, and acknowledgments. Next is the consent agenda, which consists of items to which the applicant is in agreement with the staff recommendation and there are no known objections. To outline the order in which the meeting is to be conducted, each petition has a report presented by the staff to the board providing information regarding the petition. After the staff presentation, board members may ask questions of staff regarding the presentation for clarification. The petitioner is then offered an opportunity to present their matter before the commission. The board will then ask questions of the petitioner. Afterwards, the floor will be open for public comment. Total public comment time today will be 2 minutes. And I will wrap the gavel if we go beyond 2 minutes. You will be timed. I will also ask that if you hear someone else mention or discuss the same area that you're going to talk about, I would ask that you cede your place as a speaker card to allow someone else to talk, since we have an overflowing crowd today. After the floor has been open for public comment on a position and is closed, there will be no additional public comment. At that point in time, the board will then take a vote. First item is approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Properly moved by Mr. Coles and second by Mr. Welch. I'm sorry. Yes. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? All in favor signify by hand vote.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next is notices, proclamations, and acknowledgments. The May 21st, 2019 planning meeting will be held here at 1 p.m. at the Mendonza hearing room. Next on our matter is a matter that has been canceled that requires us to vote on. We had a commission board retreat. It has been canceled. Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the cancellation of the retreat.
So moved.
Second.
Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? Ready for a vote? Hand vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have items that have been requested to be removed from the final agenda. Item 4. Is there anyone here to speak on item 4? There being none, the chair will entertain a motion to remove this item from the final agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Properly moved by Mr. Cole, second by Mr. Manigo. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? We're now ready for a vote. All in favor signify. All opposed. Motion carries. Items to be withdrawn, we have none. We have 2 items on our consent agenda. I will consolidate them and take them together. Item number 5. Let me slow down a bit. I will take them separate because I see we have item number 6. Is anyone here to speak on item number 6? Okay, 1 second, sir. That matter is on consent. Are you the petitioner?
No, I'm the architect. Yes, I'm the petitioner for the project.
Okay, that matter is consented to, so unless you wish to say something, thank you. Okay, I will now take item 5 and item 6 on the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to combine those two.
Motion to combine. and
Second.
approve.
It's been properly moved by Mr. Cole, second by Mr. Welch. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? Chair will entertain a hand vote. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7, rezoning map amendment, Mr. Williams.
Didn't we have this one, right?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. Before us today is an item that you previously heard and discussed on last meeting. It is a request to rezone one parcel at 7201 Van Buren Avenue. Just to give you some context, near its intersection with Eisenhower Drive, from a current R6 single-family residential zoning district to an IP, or institutional professional zoning district. Since most of the context of this petition was raised in detail during our previous meeting, I'll briefly just simply revisit some issues that were raised and discuss some new developments in this case, particularly with regard to the issue of access. As I noted before, Van Buren does not terminate quite on Eisenhower. There's no actual curb cut here. And the issue then was if this property was rezoned, would access then be provided only via Eisenhower, or would you also have vehicles coming up this residential street and potentially causing adverse impacts on the neighborhood? There were also concerns over, whether or not, even if the petitioner had, committed to provide access only via Eisenhower, was there a legal way to hold them to that commitment? So a few days ago, we received an affidavit signed by the petitioner, which certifies that if the property is rezoned and ceases to be used for residential purposes, it currently hosts a single-family residence, that the owner will submit a site plan for review and approval by the Metropolitan Planning Commission. It further certifies that such site plan will provide no access easement, preventing access to the property from Van Buren Avenue. All access to the property shall occur from Eisenhower Drive. The combination of legally limiting access and review by the MPC board allays many of the concerns that staff had previously regarding this petition. There are still a range of uses permitted under IP that may have the possibility of adverse impacts on the neighborhood adjacent residences, but the size of this site presents some constraints, and of course some of the more intense uses, like for example hotels, are also subject to ZBA approval. The MPC review requirement should help address concerns over some of these incompatible land uses. I should note that from a land use perspective, the zoning across the street is institutional professional, to the west is community business, and to the east is a mixed-use office and institutional district. Rezoning this parcel would therefore be primarily consistent with the surrounding land uses. So in conclusion, staff is recommending approval of the request to rezone the subject property, but with the explicit condition that a site plan be approved by the MPC for any future changes in land use, and that all access to the subject property occur only from Eisenhower Drive. I should note further that if you wish, you are entitled to add additional conditions to this approval if you feel them appropriate, and I'll happily entertain any questions.
Questions of Mr. Williams? Yes, Mr. Cook.
How are you going to prevent traffic from coming in from Van Buren?
Well, this would, my understanding, and of course you can ask the petitioner this in detail, my understanding is that during the site plan review process, whereby a general development plan will come back before you, details of how that would have to be addressed and specifically would be presented to you. And it could entail, for example, closing off Van Buren Avenue further down prevent access here. Their signed affidavit, and again, you can ask them more details about how, in fact, it's legally binding and so on, insists that they will not have access from Van Buren, that a new curb cut would be required from Eisenhower Drive. If they can't meet those requirements and the site plan comes back for review, you are entirely entitled to deny that site plan.
Wouldn't that be up to the traffic engineer to close off that street?
So the process by which they would close off the street would require involvement with the traffic engineer. The applicant, and again you can ask them this, has been in contact with traffic engineering, and traffic engineering has suggested that a curb cut off of Eisenhower right here may be appropriate. They are not at the stage of willing to entertain any major reconfigurations or anything until a formal site plan is submitted. So it is at that stage that that would be addressed.
Any additional questions of Mr. Williams? Thank you, sir. Petitioner is present. If you would please step forward and state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, members of the MPC. For the record, Josh Yellen here today, once again on behalf of Ms. Brenda Horton, who is the property owner. I don't want to take too much time today as we are now in agreement with the staff recommendation, which is for approval. We have supplied MPC with our affidavit, which shows that we will willingly, and we do intend to come back with a site plan. On that site plan, one of the conditions is that we will put a no access easement on Van Buren. This is very different than just stating that we will not do access on Van Buren. It actually must be designated on a site plan in the same way that a proactive easement is. This is a negative easement that no one can access that portion of the site from a vehicular standpoint. So we are fully intending to bind the Hortons, and we want this to be read into the record today so that when we come back with a site plan before you, which will hopefully be very soon, that when that recommendations come forward with a site plan, you can reference this hearing and state that you said X, Y, and Z, and we will not have vehicular access from Van Buren Street. And I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all may have.
Yes, Mr. Noel.
I have a question for it's both the petitioner and the and staff. Does this requirement stick with the property, or when this owner sells the property, does it dissolve, or what happens to that document, or what kind of document is?
What you are considering right now is a zoning action, and zoning is very explicitly tied to the property. Yes.
Mr. Yellen, any follow-up? Any additional questions of Mr. Yellen? Mr. Yellen, as I understand, you've requested that this board, as a part of this motion, agree that there will be no access easement on Van Buren. Is that what I heard you say? Is that correct?
Yes, the affidavit that we provided states that we will come back with a site plan, and on that site plan, it will show a no access easement adjacent to Van Buren.
So the motion should be properly made as subject to. Okay. Any additional questions of Mr. Yellen? There being none, the chair will entertain a motion.
Is there anyone to speak?
No speaker.
I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation of approval subject to the site plan being approved by MPC and access being limited to Eisenhower.
Second.
Properly moved and second. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? I'm going to take a quick hand vote on this. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We're moving into regular business. Item number 8, zoning map amendment. Mr. Lotson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The petitioner is requesting the rezoning of property at 569 Bush Road. The request is to rezone this property from the current residential agricultural classification to the PDR SM classification for the purpose of operating a surface mine. Subject property was originally zoned RA when zoning was adopted in Chatham County in 1962. There have not been a significant number of rezonings in this area, which is somewhat remote in the county. This is Fort Argyle Road, Bush Road.
Mr. Lotson?
Yes, sir.
For 1 second. Can I get you guys to clear that doorway, please?
Go over there.
Mr. Lotson, you may continue.
Thank you, sir. This is a tax map of the subject property. As you can see it here adjacent to Bush Road, the property will have vehicular access from both Bush Road and Fort Argyle Road, which I'll show you here in just a second. The petitioner has provided a site plan as well as a reclamation plan, which is a part of the requirements of the PDR zoning classification, PDRSM zoning classification. This exhibit shows the proposed mining plan, shows 3 borrow pits that are proposed. Pit 1 located here on the west side, pits 2 and 3. The petitioner intends, in terms of vehicular access, to be able to access Bush Road, which is located in this area, and to also access Fort Argyle Road to the south, which is located here. As you can see, there's an existing 60-foot access easement through this property, and that's going to become important when we talk about the conditions that we're recommending for this development. In terms of the mining details, the standard number of days per calendar year for a surface mining operation is 225 days. This takes into account holidays, vacation days, and days attributed to inclement weather. It's anticipated that there will be a total of 659 days of mining activity during the allowable 3-year mining operation. The proposed operation would include 52,734 truckloads over that period, with a capacity of 12 cubic yards per load, and the total volume of dirt to be excavated from all 3 pits combined would be 632,800 cubic yards. The mining activity per one of our conditions would be permitted only Monday through Saturday, 7A to 7P, and 8A to 7P on Saturday. There is a requirement for a 20% of green space for this project in Chatham County. Part of that is the required 75-foot vegetative buffer that must be maintained around the subject property. Upon completion of the mining operation, the site will be closed out in conformance with the Georgia Environmental Protection Division and the Chatham County zoning ordinance. The applicant has provided the reclamation plan that is required for development of this type. The proposed reclamation plan turns the borrow pits into recreational lakes, and there are also 37 home sites that would be established adjacent to another a single-family home development that is currently underway in terms of the review process. We did have, as I mentioned, several conditions. We're recommending approval, but for the general development plan and the rezoning. But we do have several conditions. Those include that the petitioner shall be responsible for maintaining these sections of Bush Road and Fort Argyle Road to be determined by the county engineer regarding any impacts, including dirt and dust removal associated with this activity. We're recommending as a condition that the area to be mined shall be fenced for security purposes. We're also recommending that the plan be revised to show a tire knockoff zone for the proposed knocking off of dirt and clay tracked onto Bush Road and Fort Argyle Road, and we're recommending that that be not less than 50 feet in length or as determined by the county engineer in terms of that distance. The hours of operation I noted to you before, and we're also revising or recommending that they revise their mining plan to identify the 75-foot perimeter buffer as an undisturbed vegetative buffer. And lastly, regarding that access easement that we discussed down to Fort Argyle Road, although MPC staff is not aware of any known restrictions regarding the use of that, the surrounding property is owned by the City of Savannah, and we're recommending that the City of Savannah be made aware of the proposed operation and the applicant reach out to them as a condition of approval to allow the city the option to relocate that access easement to another portion of the property or to have it improved as they see fit. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Mr. Lotson? Yes, Mr. Welch.
And there will be a security there around this property?
Yes, sir.
Any follow-up, Mr. Welch? Any additional questions of Mr. Lotson? Thank you, sir. Is the petitioner present? If so, please step forward and state your name for the record.
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Coleman with Coleman Company. I'm here on behalf of the property owner, Kevin Jackson. Marcus did a fantastic job presenting the project. As you all are aware, this part of the community is very rich in select fill material. There's probably a couple of dozen pits that have been operated, closed successfully in this area. If you look at the aerials, you probably got about 3 or 4 pits that are active in this area right now. This is as y'all can imagine, the materials has been set aside to a specific development a developer. So we see it as a great use. This type of development does promote low-density growth. You're building a bar pit, and it's going to be a recreational lake when we get done with it. So we feel like that we're putting a good proposal in front of you guys, and we certainly appreciate your support.
Questions of Mr. Coleman? There being none, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
I have 3 speaker cards, and I will caution my speakers that at the very beginning I indicated you would have 2 minutes, and you will be timed. First speaker card is Mr. John Yates. If you would, please step forward, state your name for the record, sir, and you have 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. My name is John Yates. I'm a resident of Bush Road, and I represent the homeowners on Bush Road. I have a petition signed by them to deny this. I'd had every neighbor, but I was out of state, and I got back and saw this and went out and got these signatures this morning. But we state, we the undersigned below oppose the rezoning of portion of Bush Road from RA to PORSM. The road is already in need of repair, which has been asked since Russ Abott was the county commissioner to repair. We have been told it will be on next year's budget with no resolve. We feel the increased traffic will be a continued problem to the decay of our road. The trucks passing through already speed and cause a great risk to our children at play and an increased risk for accidents. Scottsdale Community Park is a draw for more traffic, and the big trucks could cause more risk for families coming to the park for all the activities that can be had there via tennis, basketball, running, soccer, boating, competition, picnicking. We want our families to be safe, and please consider our request to turn down this request for rezoning to protect our road and community. We would like to thank you for your consideration. I have 28 signatures, almost every resident on Bush Road. I had them all, but I got started late. I did it this morning. But we oppose it. Our road's in poor condition. At the end of the road, you have to go around it or you go in the canal. These big trucks speed through there. If there's access to 204, they already have bar pits up and down 204 and Little Neck. The county now has brought in trash refuge, which they have been bringing those big trucks. They don't slow down either. We appreciate relief on this. We don't want those trucks on our road. The road's in bad condition. They paved it once, then they paved it again. They still haven't resolved the problem.
Thank you,
Appreciate your consideration.
Any questions of Mr. Yates?
I have a copy of those signatures.
If you'll please hand it to the lady at the table. Thank you, sir. There being no question of Mr. Yates, I have another speaker card of Mr. Philip Jennings. Philip Jennings, if you would, sir, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes, sir.
I'm Phil Jennings, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. 2 things. Quality of life is number one, and I've been there 28 years when that road was dirt, and then they paved it in '91. Has not been anything done to it since then, and there's going to be someone really, really hurt. A lot of the pipes underneath the road have disintegrated, so there's dips all the way across the road, and every year, anyone that lives on that road has seen the cars in that Savannah Geechee Canal right up to the windshield. And so far, no one's died, but it's going to happen. But my biggest concern is safety and quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. Any questions of Mr. Jennings? Thank you, sir. I have another speaker card for Mr. Banks. If you would, please step forward, state your name for the record, sir, and you have 2 minutes as well.
You're crazy.
My name is Perry L. Banks Sr. I live on 310 Bush Road. You heard already what Mr. Yates said, Mr. Jennings. But if you go to my house right now, because of the dump trucks, with the edge of the road, right there, there's a cave-in all the way up down the road. All the way, not in front of my house only, but only further down. I cut my driveway side of the road, by the road. You can't cut it no more because it's caving in, caving in. What is more dump trucks gonna do on Bush Road? If you go down like far in, like where they're gonna come out on the road, it's already tore up. I don't know how the bus drivers even drive down Bush Road because of the way the road's like this, all the way down. I'm asking that they stop this thing from going on Bush Road. If you're gonna do anything, go out to 204. It's a better road. We always see trucks hauling up and down Bush Road every day, dump trucks hauling from 204 down Bush Road, down to the dump, right by 95, and then out. They could go down the other way. Well, I want to propose to stop this right now going on Bush Road. If they keep on, the record, we're not going to have no road whatsoever. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Banks? Thank you, sir. I have no additional speaker cards. Chair will entertain a I'm sorry. Petition, you have anything to say?
Again, Terry Coleman, Coleman Company. I understand the concerns about Bush Road. It's on our plan as an optional access. We would be more than happy to limit our access to Highway 204 unless we run into problems with the City of Savannah DOT, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yes, Mr. Manigault, followed by Mr. Noah.
Have you had the pleasure of meeting with some of the people that live in the area concerning about the road?
No, sir. I think their concern is regarding Bush Road.
Yes, right.
And we're comfortable with that not being our access.
Okay.
And you'll make the necessary arrangements so it won't happen
Yeah,
or will happen?
We have access to Highway 204.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Noah, Mr. Coles.
My question, I have two. One, I think he just answered that the plan says going to Fort Argyle.
Yes, sir.
So we're not going to use Bush Road. And then the other is, who, and it's somewhat pertinent to this, because of the ownership of the road. Just to clarify, I don't think the county has anything to do with that roadway, but if you're agreeing to go to Fort Argyle, Bush is out the door, so it doesn't matter. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Coles.
So my question is to staff, can we enforce that in the approval rezoning?
You can condition it.
Yep.
You can make it as a condition if that the applicant has proffered to not use that as a road, but it needs to go with the zoning.
Okay.
That's okay, Mr. Slay. Any additional questions? Chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve staff's recommendation of approval, subject to the agreement that Bush Road will not be used as an access point per Mr. Coleman's.
Second that.
Properly moved, Mr. Coles, second by Mr. Welch, and at the same time, Mr. Noah. Any discussion?
There are other conditions under the approval. Do they need to be noted?
No, not based on the recommendation of staff. That would be addition to what's on there already. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? We are ready to vote.
How do I get out of this? Oh, I got it.
Hand vote. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9, rezoning map amendment, Mr. Lonestetter.
Yes, thank you, sir. Someone have the laser pointer?
Said she needs to record it better.
Who voted and who, yea or nay?
Yes, no one voted nay. I didn't see it. No. I looked.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The request here is to rezone property at 109 Chevis Road, located in unincorporated Chatham County, from its existing RA Residential Agriculture District to an R324 zoning district. That stands for multifamily residential, 24 units per net acre. The subject property consists of one landlocked parcel located south of Ogeechee Road to the west of Chevis. And I say it's landlocked because it does not have direct frontage along either of these roads. Based on aerial photographs, it appears that the subject property here is improved with a manufactured home and several accessory structures.
If you would, please turn your phones off or put it on silent.
When we take a look at the zoning map, you can see that the property is immediately adjacent to the east of 3 existing R324 parcels. And based on a sketch plan provided by the petitioner, looking north this way, you have Ogeechee Road running this way. Sorry if I just flashed the laser in anybody's eye over there, but Ogeechee Road here, the subject parcel right here, appears that the intent is to combine the subject parcel with these 3 existing R324 to allow for one unified multifamily development. I do want to note that this is not a formal general development plan submittal. This is simply a sketch plan showing what potentially could be developed on the site, as well as the potential density. If we do take a look at the potential density of the R324 district, the existing site plus the parcel here would amount to approximately 16.8 gross acres. If we take about 70% of that for net acreage, discounting land needed for infrastructure and road, we get about 11.75 net acres, which would allow for a total of 282 dwelling units on the combined site. That may sound like a lot, but I do want to note that the existing parcel, which is already zoned R324, by right could be developed with 227 units. So we're looking at about 55 additional units with the addition of this parcel. The zoning ordinance lists 3 factors that should be considered by the Metropolitan Planning Commission when considering a rezoning to the R3 district. The first is traffic generated by the proposed development compared to the uses that could be accommodated under the existing zoning, the existing RA. The second is the capacity of the water and sewer system, and the third is the compatibility of development with surrounding land uses. With regards to traffic, again, because the parcel is landlocked, we would recommend, if a rezoning is favorable to you, recommend conditioning it upon a combination with the existing R324 parcels. And the primary reason for that, or one of the primary reasons, is to limit primary access to Ogeechee Road and from Ogeechee Road, rather than allowing access from the less intense Chevis Road, which has less capacity than Ogeechee Road. However, we do find that Ogeechee Road has enough capacity to accommodate the 55 or so additional units that could be built on the site. In terms of water and sewer, there is city water and sewer within the Ogeechee Road right-of-way, so we don't envision this being an issue related to the rezoning. And in terms of compatibility with adjacent land uses, the subject site is bordered on the north by some existing light industrial and commercial land uses. To the west, we have vacant land, which is zoned for R324. And then to the south and to the east, we have RA zoning, which is large lot, single-family residential zoning. So the primary concern would be the development's relationship with these single-family areas. However, because multifamily developments under the zoning ordinance are subject to screening and buffering requirements, in combination with the conditions that we're proposing limiting access to Ogeechee Road, we feel that the negative impacts of this rezoning could be mitigated. So in summary, we do, actually before I go on there, the future land use is pretty consistent with the existing zoning districts and the existing land uses. We have regional commercial to the north, general residential, which allows for multifamily and single family in excess of 10 dwelling units an acre. And then the subject site itself and the land to the south and to the east is planned for suburban single family residential, which is planned for a density not to exceed 5 dwelling units an acre. So again, if you do find the rezoning favorable, we also recommend amending the future land use map to go from its suburban single family residential to a general residential designation. In summary though, based on these findings, staff is supportive of the rezoning, contingent upon the subject site being combined with the 3 existing R324 parcels to the west, and also conditioned upon primary access being limited to Ogeechee Road. And this would be in addition to a future land use amendment to the general residential designation.
Questions of Mr. Lonestetter? There being none, petitioner, if you would please step forward and state your name for the record.
You don't need this? You can just go to the plan.
Mr. Yellen, you ready?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, for the record, I represent the petitioner, and with me today is Mr. Cord Wilson, who would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. As Mr. Lonestetter pointed out, this is essentially an expansion of an existing project that you approved a couple of years ago. The parking and the access, as you can see, are connected to one another, and I say, as you see, I clearly wiped it off the screen, and I apologize for that, if you don't mind. And the buildings will be of similar size and similar construction. Mr. Lonestetter had two conditions, which were that we recombined into one, which we are agreeable to, and that access only be to Akichi Road, we are also agreeable to. The question that was asked over my shoulder was whether or not there had been a general development plan also submitted, and I think the answer is no, there had not been. There was? Apparently there was a separate general development plan also submitted with our petition, which apparently did not find its way before you.
We have a sketch plan, but that was the only thing that was submitted.
Yeah. Okay, apparently there was also a general development plan. Perhaps we can make sure it's on the next agenda for general development plan approval as well.
It wouldn't happen.
We haven't received a general development.
I'm not aware.
Not on.
Either way, the general development plan could be handled administratively after the rezoning goes through, assuming it does go through, may not. But the general development plan, there are no conditions in this district that would require it to be reviewed by this body. It could be handled administratively.
Thank you, Mr. Lonestetter.
We're fine with that, but the petition was filed, and we'll deal with staff afterwards. But thank you. We're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions of Mr. Yellen? There being none, the chair will entertain. I have no speaker cards. Chair will entertain a motion.
Put staff recommendations with.
Motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Been properly moved by Mr. Cole, second by Ms. Milton. Any discussion? Any unreadiness? We're ready to take a vote. It will be computer. Hand vote?
It's ready.
Nope, it's ready.
Oh, I thought it was.
You make it work.
Stop. What are you telling me? Hand vote. Okay. I couldn't do the sign language for me there. All right. All in favor, signify. All opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 10, Mr. Williams.
All right, before you is a request to rezone a 3-acre portion of a 4.22 acre parcel on the west side of Beverly Street here, near its terminus, and this is, so the end of it's a dead-end road. Then this would be from a R2, or two-family residential zoning classification within the unincorporated county, to an RMH, or residential manufactured home zoning classification. To give you some context, Lewis Mills Boulevard, Veterans Parkway, and then the Hunter Army Air Base right here. The petitioner is asking in particular that only a portion of his parcel be rezoned. The front portion would remain a single-family residence, and the rear 3 acres is being asked for a residential manufactured home classification. I should note that as part of this petition, the public notice incorrectly indicated that the petitioner is requesting an RMH1, which is a residential manufactured home park zoning classification. That's impossible in this case because you would need 5 acres for that. There are only 3. It's our feeling that because that's a much more intense request than what is being asked for here, that sufficient public notice has been given. We did receive a letter, in fact, very recently, in opposition, but I believe that was, I'll duly go through it, but I believe that was in reference to a residential mobile home park and not this separate designation, which is for individual manufactured homes on separate lots. The subject property is surrounded by R2 zoning on all sides, which permits both duplexes and single-family residences. There's an undeveloped portion to the south. The proposed RMH district is intended explicitly for manufactured homes. Among the criteria and the definition for this district are that development be intended for sparsely developed areas, and it can explicitly be used on a lot-by-lot basis. See here that there are several other existing instances of the RMH zoning nearby, both here, here, and also here, as well as other instances within the broader neighborhood. If rezoned as proposed, the petition would be permitted 3 total manufactured homes, 1 per acre. Development standards between the existing and proposed districts are very similar. Lot sizes, setbacks, and so on are broadly set by, for example, lot size by the requirement for septic separation. The criteria for rezoning we find are met in this case. 3 homes, 3 additional manufactured homes will have a negligible effect on traffic volumes. The property is well screened, and it's at the end of a dead-end road. There are other instances, as I've noted, of mobile home districts in the adjacent areas or manufactured home districts. It will not change the uses permitted, still residential, or the scale of development. If anything, the RMH district permits fewer units than what would be permitted under the existing zoning. We find it's unlikely to have adverse impacts on adjacent properties and is consistent with the future land use map here, which is residential, suburban, single family. So as a result, staff is recommending approval. I should note that we had 1 letter of opposition. This is a woman named, and I'll read it here, a woman named Blandeth English. Her home is located at 5914 Beverly Street. She requests that the petition to rezone this area be denied. This is a residential area, and to rezone to a mobile home park district, like Mr. Parrish would like to, would greatly increase traffic on this dead-end street. I also feel that it would bring the property value of my home down if I ever wanted to sell. So I read that into the record. I should note that staff's response is that the addition of 3 homes is unlikely to impact traffic in this case, but I'm happy to address any questions.
Mr. Manigault, Mr. Noah.
Are you saying that it's 3 manufactured homes per acre?
3 total, 1 per acre.
1 per acre?
Yes.
Okay, just clear because you used 3 there and it's confusing.
Yeah, my apologies.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Noah.
You stated that there was 1 letter in opposition, is that correct?
Yes.
She's present, by the way, Mr. Noah.
Sir?
She's present, by the way.
Right. And I don't know when I got this, but do you have the one from Mary and Horace Lewis and then a petition with many, many signatures? Okay. I just want to make sure they get put into the record.
Okay, it must have just been submitted in this case.
Okay.
Yeah, we have it received this morning.
Got it.
So.
Ms. Southers.
Access to that property will go from Beverly Street through the 1.22 acres that's not being rezoned, is that correct?
Yeah, so as a result of this, the RMH district specifies it's treated like single-family homes. Standard single-family homes, each one would have to be on its own individual lot, so a subdivision would be required, and presumably as part of that, an access easement would need to establish from this portion to Beverly Street, across this front portion of the property.
Shouldn't that be located as part of the rezoning so that there's always some way to get to that piece of property?
Well, per the subdivision regulations in the county, the subdivision would not be permitted were it not some an access easement or a new road or right-of-way opened to provide it. So that's addressed administratively through the subdivision process.
Any additional questions of Mr. Williams?
I just wanted to add and clarify something that was said earlier. The applicant did apply for an RMH1 district, which is a manufactured home district that allows manufactured home parks, when the intent here is more of a single-family nature with individual lots. So because we did advertise it as RMH1, your action would have to be to deny that district and recommend an alternative, less intense district, which is the RMH district, which can be done because it is less intense than the RMH1. We just want to make sure that our procedure is right, because the application was for RMH1 and the notices went out as RMH1. just recommend the alternative RMH when making your motion. Thank you.
My question is,
Yeah.
Since it was advertised differently, does that affect the outcome of it on this side, or should it be re-advertised properly?
You do have the opportunity, and you have the opportunity in all rezoning cases to recommend an alternative district to the county commission. So to make sure a procedure is working correctly, that's the way we would approach it here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The petitioner is present. If you will, sir, please step forward and state your name for the record.
Good evening, panel. My name is Randy Parrish. I'm here in behalf today of trying to get this land developed into 3 single mobile homes per acre. Like he said, when we applied for the application, we went on the support of them asking, is this what we needed for what we were doing? And they told us that that's what, we needed. And I've had several neighbors that I've contacted out there that were worried that we were putting in a mobile home park. So they had said that they had went through and signed a bunch of petitions and things like that, thinking that we were having a park put in. And I explained to them that, no, that's not what we're doing. We're just cutting 3 single lots and putting mobile homes there. And the mobile homes that we do are, when she's talking about devaluing the land, these are kind of what we do and what we have, I don't know how you would do that, but can you?
Let me also clarify, you mean 1 mobile home per acre?
1 mobile home per acre, sir.
You, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And across the road, there's mobile homes. There's mobile homes beside me. There's mobile homes to the left. And right now it's zoned for stick frame housing, which the stick frame housing, let's see. And this ain't gonna work. Okay. But these are some of the mobile homes that we do. What we do is we go in and we'll buy a mobile home and remodel it basically from scratch. We gut them, put all house material in them. Real wood floors, real wood cabinets. See if I can do some of these kitchens. Let's see. See, this is some of the kitchens that we do. They're not just your standard, what we're trying to do. We're trying to create affordable living for people, and it generates money for the city also. There's city taxes, light bills, it's just raw land right now, not doing nothing with. We've owned the property for 40-something years. It's not something we're buying to, redo. We're trying to, use the land as best that we know fit to use. I would appreciate your support and help, anything that I can do. As he stated earlier, there's already some M1H1s that are on the same road that I'm on now. I don't see where it's profitable to build stick family homes when I have mobile homes already beside me. They're never going to move. They've been there for 20 years. It just, on an economical standpoint, I don't see how it can, work.
Questions of the petitioner? Yes, Mr. Manigo.
Yes, sir.
Have you had the pleasure of meeting with some of the neighbors in the area?
I know most of them. Yes, sir.
Well, knowing
Yes, sir.
them is one thing, meeting them is the primary goal.
Yeah.
Because if you decide this is what you want to do,
Yes, sir.
and they decide this is not going to work, it's not going to work.
Yes, sir. That's exactly right.
Okay? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions of the petitioner? Yes, Mr. Cook.
The only access to this property is from Beverly Street.
Yes, sir. The only access is from Beverly Street. Yes, sir.
Any further questions? Yes, Ms. Milton.
So how much property is there?
There's 4.22 acres. So we were going to take the 2.22 acres and use that as an easement and take the 4 acres and develop into 4 acre, the original house of 3 more acres with lots is what we're going to do with it. And cut each individual lot into 1 acre lot and put a mobile home on the 3 acre lots and leave the existing house that's there. It was a farmhouse that my grandpa owned, and he farmed the land for many, many years.
So all of these signatures?
Yes, ma'am.
Was this You said it was based on the way it was advertised?
I think it's based on the way it was advertised. They thought we were putting a mobile home park in and was going to bring 25 or 30 mobile homes in, and there's no city sewage, no city water. It's got to be septic, so, I mean, that's not even possible for what they advertised or how it was advertised. Yes, ma'am.
Any
So
additional?
you've met with them since?
Yes, and I explained to some, and I haven't met with all of them, I can go ahead and tell you. I've only met with one or two, and when I explained the situation, they was like, oh, okay, I understand, yeah, that, you know, that makes more sense, you know.
Any follow-up question? Any additional questions? Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, thank you.
I have several speaker cards. I will start off with Ms. English. Is Ms. English present? Sounding once, sounding twice.
In the hallway.
Okay. Someone call the hall for Ms. English.
Pick the next person.
Okay. Next speaker card is for Mr. Thank you. Next speaker card is for Mr. Cortez. If you would, sir, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Sir, my name is Jeffrey Cortez. I live down at 5916 Beverly, the very end of that property where the dead end street ends. And I'm the gentleman that went and collected all those signatures. And for the gentleman over here to say that he spoke to 1 or 2 people. And the general outline of that is we understood that there was supposed to be 3 to 5 trailer homes going on there. As he's saying, that's still 3. And you've got almost 40 signatures in front of you of people opposing that. Now, I have a 1-year-old child at the end of my street, and I bought my property under the impression that it was going to stay a small street like this. Now, there are some trailers down there that I understand, but the traffic on that road is already becoming outrageous. Now, if you're going to add 3 or more, that's just going to add more traffic on that road. And it's just going to become more and more of a problem for people going through there. So my issue is that we're going to add more and more to this. Oh, but is it a little light for 2 minutes?
You still have a minute.
Okay.
Well, less than a minute now.
But still, I understand where he is saying on that, and I'll wrap up with, but still 3 trailers is what the signatures were based on as well, 3 to 5. So he's got 40 signatures almost there opposing this.
Questions of Mr. Cortez? Yes, Mr. Welch.
This is signatures opposing 3 trailers?
3 to 5, sir.
3 to
Yes,
5.
and
Have
even
you talked to the neighbors that he talked to that said they were in favor?
Every signature that's on there is one that I collected with the help of Gail right there and another Miss Brenda right there. So between the 3 of us, I've spoken to almost every person on that street, and they're opposed to it.
Mr. Coles.
And just to verify through staff, the question for Mr. Cortez, are you guys aware that the way it's zoned now, he could have just as big an impact on traffic as what he's proposing the zoning to be? So by right, he could build houses on that property now in more units than 3.
I mean, I did not know that, but I mean, understanding that, yes, but I still like it to not be as it is. So, but I mean, I understand the question, so.
Additional questions of Mr. Cortez? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I have another speaker card for Ms. Sheehan. If you would, ma'am, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Sandra Sharon. For 23 years, I've owned 2.1 acres on Beverly Street. It's a 1/2 mile residential dead-end street. We have turned over, there's no one on the block that I know of that supports these mobile homes coming in at the end of the street. A change from R2 to any form of more mobile, it's R2. It could negatively affect Girard, Lewis Mill, and Beverly Street. All have multi-acreage lots, which potentially opens these 3 streets to becoming multiple mobile home parks or multiple mobile homes per acreage. And it's a residential street. The addition of these mobile homes could also cause the overflow of already full county ditches. Ms. Kendra Roos, a local real estate agent, says our property values will drop approximately 30%. The only property owner that I know that would gain from this is Mr. Parrish and his mother, who's a real estate agent. So who would want more mobile homes on their street, which is residential? Nobody. Thank you very much.
Ms. Sharon, hold on, please. 1 second.
Sorry.
And I apologize for mispronouncing your name, Ms. Sharon. Any questions of Ms. Sharon? Yes, Mr. Coles.
Are there indeed mobile homes on either side of the petitioner's property?
Pardon?
Are there indeed mobile homes on either side of the petitioner's property?
The way I understood it when I moved in, which is true, outside of somehow one or two, there are about 30 plots. Of those 30, lining the street, they are all homes. They are not mobile homes. In the 70s, there were a few people who put a mobile home behind their home for their mother or their father, a few. But that was it. And that's what I understood when I moved in 23 years ago.
And you understand that his proposal is to put the mobile homes behind the single-family home that's on the frontage road?
Well, it opens it up because every acreage, I have 2 acres, Mr. Cortez has 5, it opens up the whole street to put in multiple mobile homes, changing truly from residential to mobile home.
Mr. Williams and then Mr. Manigault. Mr. Williams, you wanted to say something very quickly?
I simply wanted to clarify that the size of plot here is limited because these are on individual water and sewer. They're not connected to a network system, utility system. That the health department, Chatham County, enforces a 1 acre minimum on these lots. That is limiting the density in this case. The current R2 zoning permits duplexes, whereas the RMH district that is being requested permits only single-family manufactured homes. At issue here, then, is not the density, not the development standards, because they're otherwise identical, but only whether or not the type of home should be allowed is manufactured or is required to be stick-built. That is all.
Thanks for that clarification. Mr. Manigault, followed by Mr. Noah. Thank you, Mr. Williams. And I know Mr. Manigault had a question of Ms. Sharon.
Ms. Sharon, the gentleman that was up and showed the pictures of the homes after they are completed, they don't look like mobile homes anymore. Are you aware of that?
They may not look like mobile homes, but when people are going to come around to buy, they're going to ask, they're going to know they're mobile homes. Everybody knows what's a mobile home. But the problem is with Beverly Street, it has so many acres.
Yes.
Going down the street.
Right.
That very easily, you could end up with, you have a gentleman with 5, not Mr. Cortez, who could turn that into more mobile homes. And the value goes down, and the neighborhood gradually, there's no doubt in my mind that neighborhood will go from residential to mobile home.
I see. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Noah?
For staff. Yeah. For clarity, can you identify what a mobile home classification is?
So
is that residential or not?
It's purely residential. Okay. Yes.
That's all I have.
Okay. Ms. Wilson, you have something wish to add?
I was just going to. I was just going to say, and I know that you know this, that you do have a difference with regards to a mobile home and a stick-built home. Right. Of course, a stick-built home is built to the building code, and a mobile home is built to the HUD standard. So it is different quality construction. So I just wanted to make sure that we...
I was speaking more of the terminology of whether it was residential or not.
The use itself is, a residential use is a residential use. Type of housing is one thing, but when you ask about mobile home, there is a distinct difference between that. But residential use is a residential use.
I have one more speaker card. I have a Ms. Fennell. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize. Barbara Fennell or Fennell. Okay. I have no additional speaker cards. The chair will entertain a motion.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
Discussion. Let me caution the motion. Staff recommendation would be subject to the RMH district, so would you kindly withdraw your...
Withdrawn.
Properly withdrawn. Chair will entertain a motion.
Then I'll make the motion to deny the RMH1 and approve the RMH.
Second.
Properly moved and second. Discussion.
The RMH1 includes a park,
That is my understanding, yes.
and RMH does not.
Does not. That is correct. Any further discussion? Yes, Mr. Noel.
Being that there is some opposed views here, would this not be the time that maybe we asked to delay the vote and have the homeowner go back and speak to the neighbors, let him clarify what he's doing, and then they have that opportunity? I mean, it was advertised differently than what they're asking for. Or we're talking about giving something differently than and I know it's a downgrade, I get it. But I just think that there's a time that we could give them the opportunity to explain to their neighbors what's going on, because a bad neighbor, I mean, it's just not, that's my opinion. I mean, we've got a motion on the floor, someone can call for the vote.
We do, and I will say I do not think that's within our purview to force a petitioner to go and talk to neighbors.
No. Give the opportunity, is all I said. I didn't ask him to go speak to anybody. But because it was advertised differently than we're voting on, I just think this would be the time that possibly we could encourage some communication. We can't require anything.
What your question is whether it would be, could it be re-advertised or not?
Correct.
We have a motion, and the motion has been seconded. Any further discussion? Any unreadiness? I am going to take a vote on this, and let's hand vote. All in favor of the motion to change the district to RMH, signify. All opposed? It is opposed. Chair will entertain a second motion.
Make a motion that we delay till the next meeting, re-advertise appropriately, and take a vote at that meeting.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded by Mr. Welch and also Ms. Others. All in favor? Hand vote. Keep your hands up so that those votes can be recorded. All opposed? Motion carries. I am going to, the next matter coming before us is item number 11. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a quick 10-minute recess. We shall adjourn in 10 minutes, which places me at 2:50.
Good idea.
His house in just a minute.
Scared the hell out of my wife. Ooh, don't have food.
She hit.
We are back in session. I would like to acknowledge the presence of two former chairmen of the MPC, Mr. Jim Overton and Mr. Luffborough, who are present. Thank you both for your service. And I hope I'm not embarrassing you guys up here. Will someone please summon Mr. Lotson?
And we need to clear the door again.
And while Mr. Lonerstetter is getting Mr. Lotson, I'm going to say very quickly, because we do have a capacity crowd, one, clear the doorway please for me. That point of ingress and egress should always be and remain free of traffic.
Thank you.
Hey, recognize Commissioner Farrell.
Is Commissioner Farrell's here too?
Yep.
Yes.
I'm clearing the way.
Well, thank you, sir. I didn't see you over there. Your distinguished face was behind the screen over there. Thank you. And thank you for your service. All right, let me also say this. I know many of you are here. This is democracy at its best. where citizens can come and voice their concerns and state to us what's on your mind. Now, I have said earlier, and I will say it again, I'm going to limit you to 2 minutes. So if I wrap my gavel at 2 minutes, that means 2 minutes. Having said that, I see we have an overflowing capacity crowd. And you know, some people have been standing for a while. I would ask to my overflow crowd, as you complete what you're saying, if you would kindly just sort of step out. And that way, you know, some people might want to sit down. They could sit, especially the ladies who've been standing for a while. I recognize a couple of them. Now, having said that, I'm going to begin the process. Item number 11, General Development Plan, Green Island Road. Mr. Marcus Lotson, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, let us begin. The item before you, item number 11, is a request for approval of a general development plan for a proposed development at the terminus of Green Island Road. And before we kind of go into the details of the general development plan, petition is also requesting variances, which we'll talk about in great detail. I do want to do something a little bit different and talk more about the Skidaway Island more broadly versus just the property at hand. This is sort of a unique scenario in terms of the development pattern, and I think that's important to be able to show that today. This is an aerial map of that shows the subject property and a portion of Skidaway Island. As you can see, subject property is highlighted here. It's approximately 30 acres of upland at the terminus of Green Island Road, which is approximately right there. This is the intersection of Diamond Causeway, McWhorter Drive, and Green Island Road. That's Green Island Road that's going away from you in this picture. This next photograph is a typical section of Green Island Road. It's about a 20-foot paved width. As I mentioned, it's about 2 miles from the intersection to the terminus. This is the section as you get closer to the subject property, which would be on your left. The driveway that you see here is the entrance to the South Harbor neighborhood. In terms of traffic in general, this is Diamond Causeway, the only vehicular access to the island. There are not traffic counts from GDOT on Green Island Road, which is located here. It shows the most recent counts per the traffic analysis and data application on GDOT's website, about 17,000 daily trips on Diamond Causeway and about 4,400 trips on McWhorter Drive, which is right across from Green Island Road, which is here. So that will give you some context in terms of the traffic at this site, which we'll discuss a little bit more as we go along. This is a sort of a context aerial of the area as you come onto the island. This is Diamond Causeway as you get toward the intersection with Green Island Road. This area kind of far over to the right is the area known as the Village. So this is the one sort of commercial hub, if you will, on the island. As you can see, there's a number of retail uses here, institutional uses, churches, office and retail in this area, Publix grocery store, banks. There's another bank that's under construction on the island in this area right now. The vacant lot that you see here is currently under construction for another retirement community that's underway. An existing retirement community known as the Marshes is back here, and this is really as you come off the bridge onto Diamond Causeway. The Marshes includes the congregate portion of their facility as well as these single-family sort of villas back here. I point this out because this area is very different in terms of context and development pattern from the rest of the island, which we'll go into on this next slide. So this is a broader aerial view of the area around Green Island Road. This is the road as it ends at the river. This is the subject property here. As you can see, on the south side is South Harbor, single-family residential. Along Green Island Road, you have, large lot, single-family residential, with the exception of this development here, which is a smaller lot residential development. This is the general development plan that the petitioner has submitted. And before I go into the details of the GDP, I do want to talk about the public notice aspect of this a little bit. The applicant, in our early discussions before they submitted this, we recommended that they hold a neighborhood meeting to bring stakeholders out and have the ability to ask questions and et cetera regarding the development. They did that. That meeting took place on last Tuesday at the Messiah Lutheran Church, one of the ones that I showed you on that previous exhibit. That meeting went from about 5 p.m. to 6:30. And it was probably, I did a rough head count, I think it was around 175-ish people who came out for that meeting. So one of the larger neighborhood meetings that I've seen. So there was a lot of interest and a lot of concern, frankly, about some aspects of this project. In addition to that, of course, we did our normal notice procedures in terms of sending out public notices to the property owners in the vicinity, and to the associations. The subject site, as I mentioned, is at the southern terminus here of Green Island Road, which you see on this plan. This is the entrance to South Harbor. The proposed use of the property is the development includes a mix of housing types. As shown here, they include single-family, attached and detached, multifamily, as well as congregate care in the form of assisted living and memory care. So in this area, here's the entrance again, the primary entrance road to the development. This area is the area of the single family attached, which are in the center here, and some detached on the perimeter. Here there are a total of 36 of these units, 16 detached and 20 attached that are proposed. In terms of the multifamily, which is in the rear section here, the petitioner is proposing, in terms of independent multifamily, they're proposing 35 one-bedroom and 35 two-bedroom units, total of 70 units. In the assisted living portion of the development, they're proposing 60 units, and in the memory care portion, they're proposing 50 units for a total of 216 units. As it relates to parking for this development, the petitioner is requesting a variance, as I mentioned, so I'll go through some of the details of the numbers on that. Per the PUDR zoning classification, and this property is within the PUDR classification, it requires 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. Now, this is a very different way to calculate parking than the rest of the zoning ordinance, at least as it relates to multifamily. As it relates to multifamily, in the larger, the more general ordinance, it's a sort of a sliding scale. So if you have a studio, as an example, you have 1.25 spaces that are required. A 1-bedroom requires 1.5 spaces. 2-bedroom requires 1.75 spaces, and 3 or more require 2 spaces per unit. So that calculation would normally be done if this were, say, a standard multifamily development. You do that calculation based on the mix and come up with the parking requirement. But for the PUDR zoning classification, it's a flat 2 per unit. So based on the number of units, 216, based on the PUDR zoning classification, the total requirement for parking would be 432 spaces. This is the ratio that's been, the ratio that I described as it relates to how multifamily is classified is the ratio that's been used for other similar facilities in the county, since the use is not specifically listed in the use table, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in just a second. The petitioner is proposing a total of 254 off-street spaces. That includes 72 spaces for the single-family portion, which essentially is a two-car garage for each unit, and 182 off-street spaces for the congregate care portion. And additionally, within the single-family portion of the development, they're proposing 32 on-street spaces for the purposes of overflow, which gives the entire development a total of 286 parking spaces as shown on the GDP. Relative to required buffers within the PUDR zoning classification, development of this type requires a buffer of a 50-foot buffer around the subject property, natural or landscape buffer. This is a vacant property, undeveloped, as I mentioned, so a 50-foot buffer would be required to be maintained from the existing vegetation. The proposed development plan does provide that buffer. In addition, a 30-foot buffer is proposed adjacent to Green Island Road in this area. If the general development plan is approved, a landscape plan will be required in conjunction with the specific development plan, which must be reviewed and approved by the county arborist. The landscape plan review assures that the site meets the requirements of the Chatham County Tree Protection Ordinance. Relative to the development pattern in the vicinity of the subject property, and Skidaway Island really at large, it's characterized primarily by single-family residential development. There's also, of course, significant outdoor recreational amenities on the island, but the primary commercial area is that area that we talked about a little bit ago in the area known as the Village, there on the north side of Diamond Causeway. And that area is characterized by neighborhood-scale retail, service uses, office uses, and some institutional uses as well. To go into a little more detail on the variances that are being requested, the first variance is to height. It's a 10-foot request, 10-foot height variance request. The permitted maximum under the PUDR zoning classification is 36 feet. So a variance of 10 feet obviously would give the petitioner an opportunity to build up to 46 feet in height. The petitioner is requesting that variance for the congregate care portion of the site, which is the property in the rear that hosts the multifamily independent living as well as the assisted living and the memory care. Based on the concept building elevations, which I'll show you here in a minute, the proposed congregate facilities are 2 to 3 stories in height. Staff finds in the review of this that the design decisions made by the applicant are really the impetus for the requested height variance. The 30-acre site is undeveloped. There's little precedent for the proposed height in the vicinity of the subject area. And there is no precedent really for this combination of scale and height in the vicinity of this property, although you do see larger institutional buildings in the area that is at the Village. Relative to the parking, as I mentioned, the literal interpretation would require 432 parking spaces for the proposed development. The applicant is proposing parking standards that meet those that are outlined in the more general parking requirements of the ordinance for single-family, multifamily, and for the convalescent care that was described. Because of the lack of specificity in the county ordinance as relates to congregate care as a use, determinations have been made by the county regarding some of these standards that include parking. Staff finds that really, because this is an isolated, gated community, it's unlikely to have impacts on adjacent properties, and also the fact that the PUDR parking requirements are substantially different and far less nuanced in terms of how you calculate than the base zoning ordinance, that there is some opportunity in staff's mind relative to relief in parking requirements. So with all that said, and let me just show you what I said I would show you. This is the concept elevations of the property. You can see the single-family attached and detached villas, as well as the congregate facilities adjacent to the river. We did receive and added to your agenda a number of comments from the Chatham County Engineer's Office regarding their initial review of the general development plan. And I'd like to go through these and have these on the record briefly. The first condition states that the applicant must obtain a land disturbing activities permit from Chatham County prior to any land disturbing activities. Essentially, they cannot go and start doing any work on that property until permitted through Chatham County. Approval of both the general and specific development plan will be required before that permit can be issued. So per the county engineer's office, not until a general development plan and then later a specific development plan is approved could land clearing take place on that property. They also mentioned that a traffic signal warrant analysis based on the proposed new traffic generation is required for this project prior to a permit issuance. So this is regarding Green Island Road and the Diamond Causeway intersection. I know questions regarding traffic studies have come up, and this is a statement from the county engineer's office that would require that. Further, that the new driveway curb cut on Green Island Road should line up as much as possible with Loughborough Way, and that's the entrance to the South Harbor neighborhood on the opposite side of Green Island Road. There's some information in here regarding subdivision and environmental site assessments being required if that were to take place, wetlands delineations that have to be addressed, as well as the jurisdictional determination relative to the marsh line that has to be verified that it is current. And then number 8, which is important, this is a note that says that the applicant must obtain Utilities Inc. of Georgia approval for water and sewer improvements associated with the project, and that the portions of the property that are in the special flood hazard zone. Any proposed fill below the base flood elevation will have to be mitigated per the Chatham County Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance. And the applicant's engineer is also present here today to answer sort of some of those technical engineering questions. We do have a representative from the county engineer's office here as well today. I think the rest of the comments here by the county so far in the first review of the general development plan are fairly standard, but I did want to share those with the board today. Regarding the general development plan, we do find that the GDP is substantially compliant with the standards of the variance, the standards of the ordinance outside of the variances that are being requested. We are recommending denial of the 10-foot height variance, and we are, however, recommending approval of the amendment to the parking standards based on the information provided in the staff report, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Mr. Latson? There being none, is the petitioner present?
Yep.
If you would, sir, please step forward, state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Harold Yellen. I'm here today on behalf of the owner of this property and petitioners. With me today is Mr. Stephen Loughborough and Matthew Loughborough for Loughborough Realty, Amy Sanfilippo, Michael Springer, and Mel Tobias for Springer Healthcare, and John Giordano is with Thompson Hutton, who is our project engineer, all of whom are here to answer questions y'all may have. The property before you today is, of course, located on Green Island Road. There are a number of things that make it remarkable, but one of the things that make it remarkable is the fact that it is 30 acres in size. There are very few properties of this size. Most large properties have already been developed, or at the very least, they've been subdivided, as you can see on this map. I believe that this property remained one large parcel in part because of the patience of the current owner, who was in no particular hurry to develop the property. However, now the property is under contract, and the petitioner before you is here today with a site plan for your review. To understand the size of this property, I was sort of scratching my head when I first looked at this petition. The property is really over 60 acres if you count the marsh, but if you're looking at just uplands, it's 30.88 acres. And I was trying to figure out what could I tell you to give you some indication of what 30 acres is, and the closest that I can come is Forsyth Park. Forsyth Park is 30 acres in size. And for those of us who've walked that property, that gives you some idea of the size of this property. I think it helps you understand the size of the property. I think it also allows you to understand the ability of this petitioner to be able to meet site plan requirements as well. As Mr. Lotson mentioned to you, this property is zoned PUDR, which by definition requires a site bigger than 25 acres. We are in fact bigger than 25 acres. And it also allows for a wide range of single-family residential, multifamily, and business uses. What's not very well known about the PUDR is that some of the business uses which are permitted as a matter of right would include a grocery store. So Publix, Kroger could go on this 30 acres today because it is allowable as a matter of right. Drugstores, without regard to size, like a Walgreens or a CVS. Barber and beauty shops, restaurants, without regard to alcohol or not alcohol, it just says restaurants. Gift shops, floral shops, professional offices, and other similar uses approved by the MPC. Interestingly, as a single family or multi-family development, the ordinance also allows density to include up to 20% of the marsh. Why, I don't know. That's simply what the ordinance says. So we believe this site, realistically, could accommodate between 240 to 250 homes, condos, or apartments. Thankfully, truly thankfully, that is not what is before you today. The petitioner does not look to put the highest density that he can put on this lot, although it is certainly permitted as a matter of right. Instead, you've seen this already, the petitioner is requesting a total of 216 units, but that total of 216 includes assisted living, independent living, memory care, and single family. So our development as proposed, as shown in the site plan, we believe will have far less impact than the other forms of residential development or the other forms of commercial development which are already permitted on this property. It will have particularly less impact on traffic. Our engineer will be here to speak for himself. Mr. Chairman, will you instruct anyone behind me that if they will please allow me to finish, I will give them the respect that we would ask that they give us?
I will say that, thank you. I would ask that you guys hold comment, clapping, gasping, booing, hissing, throwing shoes.
Please, sir, this is the MPC and not a rally, so we would ask for that respect.
Until the conclusion. Thank you.
Our engineer, who is qualified to testify on the issue of traffic, will tell you that a multi-family site plan like the one I showed you will generate between roughly 1,400 trips per day. This particular plan that we're showing you, 500 to 600 trips per day. You will hear that from our engineer. We believe all of our uses are permitted under the PUDR, and I know that there was a discussion at the pre-meeting about that as well. With no respect intended for the county or for the county ordinance, the uses that are before you today are not in the county ordinance. They're nowhere to be found. Even if you look at some of the PUDIS zoning districts, which contain the marshes and the Thrive, there's nothing in there about these uses, but it's always been held that these are permitted in the PUDs. NUZO, on the other hand, will be very specific. The county has opted not to adopt a NUZO, But you're seeing that in today's world of independent living and assisted living and memory care and a whole level beyond my understanding of the nursing environment or of the independent living environment. That's why NUSA is going to 5 different definitions. But the ordinance before you is the county ordinance, which simply doesn't address the uses we have before you today. So in our opinion, and after consultation with MPC staff, the matter before you is not a zoning petition. The matter before you is a site plan review. The focus is not on use, but the focus is on development and design standards. Mr. Lotson did mention to you there are 2 variances, one for height, one for parking. Because we did go to a neighborhood meeting and we listened to what people had to say, we do have a response on the issue of height. We don't need 10 feet for the entire project. We're not looking for 46 feet everywhere. As recently as this morning, I asked the question of the petitioner, can we stay within 36 feet everywhere on site, totally eliminate the need for a height variance? The response that I received, and you'll hear more from the Springer Group, is the only portion, and I'm sorry I don't have the, I'll go this way. This area, which is the front lobby, is the only area where we think there's a need for a variance, just to have a beautiful architectural feature, purely decorative. It's something that was done by Thrive when they came before you for a structural component, just to make the whole building not look like it's the same height everywhere. So what we have before you today is a request for a height variance, one place and one place only, here. And the request is not for 10 feet, it would be for 6 feet. And we think that makes all the difference in the world for us from an aesthetic viewpoint. On the issue of parking, we're simply asking that our parking calculation be the same as every other parking calculation you've looked at for this type of development. And that would include the senior housing of Marsh and Thrive. If you count the same way, we need 202 spaces. And to a question I believe asked by Ms. Southers earlier, that includes the 30 people who will be staffing this facility. So 202 is the required parking number if you count us the same way, and that includes staffing. We are in fact providing 254 spaces, and that does not include 32 additional street parking spaces, which are not part of our calculation. So we'll have 286 spaces, in fact, when 202 would otherwise be required. Once again, we believe very strongly in this project. We know this is a beautiful site. I've listened to a lot of the comments that have been made by folks, and I will tell you that the neighborhood meeting was civil, it was cordial. It's the way neighborhood meetings were supposed to be held. And I understand the concern, but the only way that we could address every single concern is to do nothing. And there's simply not an opportunity to do nothing on this site. It is a beautiful 30-acre site, zoned PUDR. So we do thank you for your consideration of our site plan. If I could ask Mr. Lufbauer to come forward, he will be addressing site plan issues. And we thank you again for your time. And we will let Mr. Lufbauer speak for Lufbauer Realty. At this time, Ms. Sanfilippo will speak on behalf of Springer Healthcare. And Mr. Giordano will answer any engineering questions you have. So thank you very much.
Any questions of Mr. Yellen very quickly? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Lufbauer, if you would please state your name for the record.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Stephen Lufbauer, petitioner. I brought some notes along today to make sure I cover all the important points, so if you'll bear with me. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present our general development plan on the project. I'd like to take just a couple of minutes before I begin, to explain what brought me and this development project here today. In about 1948, my grandfather and two partners purchased approximately 500 acres of highland that was referred to as the west end of Skidaway Island. I spent most Saturdays of my childhood going by boat to Skidaway with either my grandfather or my father. We had cabins along the bluff where Moon River Development now resides. I camped out there, learned to drive an old Jeep at age 9, and Skidaway Island has given me some of my life's fondest memories. Around 1967 to 1968, Mr. Laurie Abbott and Mr. Henry Levy, both former members of this body, became interested in getting a bridge built to the island. They were instrumental in acquiring the land for the state park and the Oceanographic Center. Shortly thereafter, a bond referendum was passed and construction of the causeways and bridges was begun. My grandfather had always shared his dream with me that the island would someday be developed to provide new homes and neighborhoods, and he was fortunate to be able to see the bridge almost completed before his death in 1969. Somewhere around 1970 to 71, my grandfather's partners sold their 2/3 interest and our land was divided. Our family kept what is now South Harbor and an 18-acre tract that separates the Moon River development of the landings and Oak Ridge phases. In 1984, my father built a home on our remaining property, and in 1986, we started the South Harbor development. And I moved my wife and 2-year-old son into the first house built in South Harbor. I tell you all of this so that you might understand that I am deeply rooted in this property. South Harbor is my family's living legacy for 4 generations. My mother, sister, and I all live there, and we still own approximately 12 lots and 15 acres of undeveloped land in South Harbor. I hope you understand that my deep love for this island and for this property, and why we have approached this development in a much more sensitive way than I believe anyone else would. This tract where our proposed development is to reside was purchased, I believe, in the early 1970s, and Mr. Yelling touched on this. It remained virtually untouched for many years. But about 2 years ago, the property was listed with a regional commercial real estate company. It was advertised nationally on LoopNet. It's my understanding that a couple of condo developers first looked at it, and one of them made an offer on the property. I was unaware that the property had been listed for sale until after the property had been on the market for approximately 6 months. I was very concerned that a large out-of-town developer might come and find the property very appealing and would develop it with an intense permitted use that could be harmful to my friends and neighbors in South Harbor and on Green Island Road, as well as to my family. About that same time, I met Mr. Michael Springer of the Springer Health Group, which is a 3-generation family business, and we began to explore how this property might be developed in a more thoughtful and less intense manner. And I'm going to ask Mr. Giordano to help me here with the pointer.
Before you do that.
Yes, sir.
Before you bring him up, I want you to complete what you're saying.
No, I'm just going to ask him to use the pointer because everybody tells me I have very shaky hands, and I don't want you to get dizzy trying to look at it. So, as I bring your attention to the general development plan, I'd like to tell you how we went about planning the project. First of all, it was very important that the neighborhood looks, feels, and functions as a residential neighborhood. We decided early on to place the two Springer buildings to the rear of the property. The buildings are to be placed at ground level with surface parking rather than parking beneath, as in, for instance, the marshes. We located the buildings more or less 100 feet from the DNR line, which has been verified. This is preserving some magnificent virgin live oak trees and other tree species along the marsh. We placed an undisturbed and heavily vegetated natural buffers to the north and south of the property, making them a minimum of 50 feet wide, but in reality, much wider in some areas. We also left additional separation between our buildings and the buffers, so to separate them as much as possible from the adjoining neighbors. Along Green Island Road, we also placed a minimum 50-foot undisturbed buffer to screen the development from our neighbors and to give privacy to our residents. And I'd like to just show you a picture from the exit of South Harbor of what that existing, of what that existing buffer looks like. All of the buffers contain trees that are 60 to 80 feet tall, as well as a thick understory, providing maximum screening for all of our neighbors. I would like to draw your attention to one more exhibit. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me 1 minute. I need to get another exhibit from Mr. Yellen. Do you have this?
While he's doing that, any of our younger persons sitting down would mind giving up their seat for some of our more mature citizens who've been standing a while? I would deeply appreciate that. There's one seat in the back.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
We're ready to continue.
You may continue.
Even though this exhibit does not properly show the existing heavily vegetated buffer that I showed you a few minutes ago, it does show the Springer buildings right there in their proper perspective with the requested height variance. As you can see, they are barely visible from the road. The neighborhood will have security and will be gated. We carefully placed the 36 single-family homes on the front of the property. A boulevard that features tree islands and trees along the sides leads into the neighborhood. The homes were carefully arranged so that residents will enter a common motor courtyard that leads to their garages. They enter from the side to avoid front-loading garages. Short streets with good connectivity were designed to minimize traffic and sidewalks, and cart paths are planned so that the community will be pedestrian and golf cart friendly. Parking is provided along the boulevard and on the Green Island Road side of the Springer buildings, as well as along the sides of the streets and motor courtyards of the single-family homes. One important concern is lighting. By placing the Springer parking behind their buildings and through the incorporation of lamp posts and other low-level lighting, we will try to eliminate as much as possible light escaping our community and intruding into our neighbor's property. I appreciate you allowing me to go into this detailed explanation of how and why we have gotten here. We have taken heartfelt and important measures as neighbors who care to make this the best alternative for developing this property. My family has always been known as thoughtful developers of high-end developments. We hope that you will agree that this development follows in that same tradition. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Loughborough?
I have a question. Mr. Loughborough, you've gone to great extremes to preserve the natural vegetated buffer of 50 feet and 30 feet on the front, but it appears that you may be clear-cutting the interior of the lot, which opens up your view envelope. Have you considered identifying the trees that are existing and trying to keep some of the existing vegetation within the interior of the property?
Ms. Suthers, first of all, we are imposing a developer-imposed 50-foot buffer along Green Island Road. Secondly, if you, and I know a number of the members of this board have been in South Harbor before. Anyone who's ever been in South Harbor knows that South Harbor is about saving trees. That has been something that we have always just been dear to our hearts. And at this particular juncture and stage that we're in with this development, we have not yet gone in to do a tree survey to identify trees, but I promise you, as with the trees that are along the marsh where we've moved the buildings back, not 35 feet as required by the environmental overlay, but mostly 100 feet, we will identify those trees and we will try to save any trees that we can. They will certainly be much. They will certainly be much better than anything we can go in there and plant in their place.
Any follow-up, Ms. Suthers? Mr. Manigault.
Mr. Loughborough, have you and your companion builders considered that you didn't have to have 10 additional feet to do this development? Or 6, but stay within the standards?
Well, Mr. Manigault, as I stated earlier, we strived very hard. For instance, all the homes in the front of the development are single story. The Springer buildings are 2-story buildings. It's been misstated by various people that they were 3 or 4 stories, but they're not. They're 2-story buildings. But I would like to think that you might be able to appreciate that where you have an entrance to a property and you have a very large room, that you need taller than 9 or 10 foot ceilings to be able to accomplish the proper proportions and perspective of it. And so that's why we're only asking for that variance. And Ms. Sanfilippo can speak better to that than I can, but that's the reason why we're asking for it, just in that limited area in the very middle of the property. It's not on the edge of the property. It's in the very middle of the complex, and we think that we're trying to make this look very residential as much as possible, and we feel like that this will give us the relief that we need in order to be able to accomplish that.
Well, with all that in mind, and with all of what you have done for the research, we all understand that a room is a room, regardless of how large it is or tall it is, and it makes it, as a salesman, easier for you to sell it if you get the 10 additional feet. So that's the only beauty that there is. It has nothing to do with anything else, with the changes of the entire community, because you have other neighbors there. And I'm sure your neighbors have some very hard decisions to make with this approval.
Well, as I said, Mr. Manigault, and as I showed, just one more time, if I may.
I'm aware of the neighborhood very well. so it doesn't matter to me. I understand.
It's a perspective, Mr. Manigault. I mean, the Springer buildings are removed 800 feet from Green Island Road. And this is a proper perspective. You can barely see them from the road. We have this very thick buffers that have 60 to 80 foot trees and a lot of understory in there. So it's going to be very difficult for any of our adjoining neighbors to be able to see these buildings or see this project. So we're just asking for the variance. A room like this, I don't know what the ceilings are in here, but they're probably, 12, 13 feet tall. When you get into a large room requires taller ceilings, and that's what the entrance into this property would be, and that's why it's strictly just limited to that particular area.
Mr. Welch?
Mr. Lefferle, if you could pull back your plan, pull it back up,
The general
Yes.
development plan?
the one you have.
Yes, sir.
You made a statement that there's more foliage on this side down below that's water. Is that due to wetland? Is there some wetland in that?
Mr. Lotson had an exhibit. There's a very small area of wetland right in that particular area right there.
How wide would you claim that buffer to be? Estimate.
Maybe I'll defer to Mr. Giordano as to how wide it might be right there.
John Giordano, Thomas and Hutton. So the existing line that's shown right there is 50 feet, so 150 maybe.
Okay. My question on the top, on the other side of the residents already living on Green Island Road, if they were to request a wider buffer, is that possible? Because you're giving them 50 feet, and I know there, speculation that there's, going to block view and this and that, the other, but is it possible wider than 50 feet to be given to them if requested to make that plan work, or any plan, not just this plan, anything that we come to a conclusion of?
Well, one problem, and here again, I may not be the best expert to speak to this, but one problem that I could see right off the bat is that the county is requiring, as they should, that we align the main boulevard coming into the property with the entrance and exit to South Harbor. So essentially, we cannot shift, for instance, like the multifamily part over, because we will then encroach in upon that space, and there's not enough space on the other side to put in an additional street. So if you'll look at the Springer building, G, the memory care, at the top of the screen,
okay,
right there, that building itself is removed a good distance, probably at least another 50 or 60 feet from that buffer that's in there. And as I say, I think Mr. Giordano has an exhibit that perhaps he can show you of what of what those trees in that particular area look like, and give you maybe a little bit better perspective of what it's going to look like from those particular properties. And I have walked that property line personally myself several times, and it's very tall trees. It's very thick in there. There's no clear line of sight into this property.
Any additional questions, Lefbar?
May I ask one more?
Yes, sir, you may.
Are you planning to build these homes, PRDs, the PUDs are, the cottages for homes? Are they going to be built all at one time, or is it going to be spec'd out as the individual visually sell? Is it going to be something already built to be sold?
These,
or,
Our plan is a bit different than some of the other developments that perhaps you're familiar with. We do not plan for this to be an equity buy-in where, people have to put up $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to come into it. We plan to retain the ownership of these. The entire development will be like a condominium with a homeowners association. So all of the maintenance of the grounds, all the maintenance of the buildings, everything will be done under one entity. And the units will not be sold. They will be leased. In answer to your question about phasing them in, yes, sir, they will be phased in. And part of that, part of the reason for phasing them in is that we suspect that there will be that the market will ask for subtle changes in the floor plan. And even though, even though we may offer a couple of initial floor plans, we will probably have some small nuances, one that has an office, one that has a larger family room or porch than another, to be able to help better meet what the market is looking for.
Well, my question then is the cottages or homes to be built first or the Springer project?
They will be built simultaneously.
Any additional questions of Mr. Lefbauer? Thank you, sir. Mr. Yellen, very quickly. Mr. Yellen, I am not one to tell attorneys how to present their cases. However, it's either Ms. Sanfilippo or Mr. Giordano. Are they necessary to your case?
I think if somebody from Springer Health could simply give just a very short, 2 minutes or less, I think, and then I'll have Mr. Giordano wait for perhaps rebuttal at the end. We can respond to any comments made that are of an engineering nature, and then we'll be done.
Great. Ms. Sanfilippo, you have 2 minutes, please.
Keep it to one.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Sanfilippo. I'm representing Springer Healthcare Systems. As Stephen mentioned, we're a family-owned business, third generation, owned by Michael and Nicole Springer. Michael's here with me today. And just wanted to talk a little bit about our facilities and what we do. Those of you that don't know us, we provide quality care for seniors, but we do that in highly luxurious senior facilities all throughout Ohio, Indiana, and South Carolina now. And this is really the main reason we're attracted to developing on the island, because we just think it's a beautiful area. We really like the waterfront views for our residents. We plan on having a grand entrance as you first come in with a bistro, a dining space, a pub and a community room, beauty and barber shop, exercise and therapy area, and a pool. So you can tell we're trying to really keep it as a self-contained area so that the residents don't have to leave campus unless they really want to. They can have all of their food service there, all of their health care there, laundry, housekeeping, everything is done there on site. So we want to be good neighbors, obviously, to everyone else on the island, but we're trying to keep ourselves very low impact. Just some questions regarding traffic that have come up. I want to clarify the memory care residents will have no cars, 0 cars for those residents. The assisted living, I expect maybe a few cars. I know we're required to have more, but just by looking at our other facilities throughout Ohio and South Carolina, maybe 2-3 cars in the whole facilities is what's been the norm for us. Independent living will allow up to 1 per unit, but again, many of those folks aren't driving anymore. So I just wanted to mention that. Regarding the height variance and the aesthetics questions that have come up, in our main lobby areas, that's where we situate the bar, that's where we situate the restaurant, where we situate the main area the residents congregate through, through most of the day. And it makes it feel a lot less clinical if they can walk into something almost feeling like a restaurant or a bar or a hotel. So that's why we chose to ask for the height variance on that portion of the building. It's honestly so the patients and residents there feel like they're in a home and not in a hospital. So I wanted to mention that as well. And also just to kind of break up the roof line as well. So that was really all I had, unless there was any questions.
Any questions, Ms. Sanfilippo? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Yellen, you wish to wrap up anything?
No, sir, just to reserve some time at the end. But
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. I have 21 speaker cards.
That's all?
21.
That's good.
That's good.
That's another 60 minutes.
When it's 5 o'clock.
I will call your name. Step to the microphone, state your name for the record, and you will have 2 minutes from that moment. Mr. Lotson, you have something you wish to add before I open the floor up to the public?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to add, and I don't think I said this in my initial comments, that we did receive numerous and dozens of emails and phone calls which are attached to the agenda. So I just wanted the public to know that every email that got sent to this office is attached to the commissioner's agenda, and they've got those before them. So it's far more than the 21 speaker cards you have, but I just wanted to put on the record that everything that we received public comment-wise is attached as a part of the information we provided y'all.
Mr. Watson, I have a question. Please make it clear to the public why we're here and what we will be voting on.
Yes.
Happy to do that,
Please.
sir. But the item that's before you is a request for approval of a general development plan for the development that you saw. Also consideration of 2 variances, one related to maximum height and one related to the parking requirement.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the clarification. Having said that, I am now opening the floor for public speak. Ma'am? Sir in the red, do you wish to speak? 1 second. Do you have a speaker card?
Sir?
Is there a speaker card for you that I have in my hand?
It's not speaker, it's a question.
Hold tight.
Later.
Hold tight. If you would, kindly get a blue speaker card so you can ask your question. That way we can have you on the record. So I will have 22 speaker cards. Mr. Branch, I'm opening this up for public hearing, if that's okay with you. Thank you.
I can speak if you
Sir, I have it in order, the way I'm going to call it. And when I get to your name, you'll have all 2 minutes to talk. No, sir, I do not look for volunteers.
You wanted to be first. You didn't want to sit through all of it.
If you have a speaker card and you've submitted it, all right. The Bible says the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Having said that, my first speaker card is Mr. Richard Lieberth. Sir, if you would, please state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Richard Lieberth. I reside in Moon River at the Landings, which is immediately adjacent to Green Island Road. I appear here this afternoon on behalf of approximately 1,000 people who have signed a petition in opposition to this particular project. These people are concerned about a variety of things, and I realize that your role in this particular project is somewhat limited. However, I will point out initially that the R1 zone does not contain, as Mr. Yellen said, anything that has to do with a project such of this nature. However, our M zone, the PUD RM, or our M zone, specifically does deal with nursing homes. The particular property is abutted by private residential lots on the north, south, and the west by South Harbor, and on the east by Jellicoe Creek and Marsh.
So you have 44 seconds left.
It has an environmental overlay. We request that the project be denied. We request that the 2 variances be denied. And we ask that you give us a continuance of 90 days where the staff can have additional time to review the various matters that have been brought to your attention in the memos that have been provided and the various written materials that have been provided to you by the residents.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mrs. Lieberth?
Lieberth.
Any questions? Thank you, sir, so much.
Thank you.
I have another speaker card for Mr. John Evans. John Evans. If you would, sir, please step forward and state your name for the record. See, you're up. No, that's
Sometimes
no,
the first
John.
gets to be first.
Thought that was him. All right.
My name is John Evans. I live at the Landings. I'm a member of the Landings Club. I'm also a realtor with the Landings Company. And it's in that latter capacity that I wanted to just make a couple comments today. I wrote a somewhat longer testimony, but obviously that's more than 2 minutes, but I'll give copies to your clerk. There are significant ramifications to our island of approving this project. I know y'all are looking at specific uses, but more importantly, variances, et cetera. But the Landings is 90% of the island's population, and along with South Harbor and Modena, represents one of the largest concentrations of residential real estate tax revenue to Chatham County. So if you impact the island negatively, in the final analysis, it's Chatham County and the Chatham County School District that are going to be impacted. We compete with 25 other communities in the southeast for residents. 2/3 of our new residents come from outside the Savannah area. And unlike the days in the past, these new residents are in their 50s or at worst early 60s. We now have 800 families on the island with school-aged kids. So this is not an island of old people looking for a place to go to die.
You have 38 seconds left.
With all due respect, it is an island of younger and younger people, of more and more active people, and this kind of community is absolutely inconsistent with that. So think of the implications to this community if you choose to allow this property to be used for the third senior living community on the island. Not the first or the second, but the third. Okay? Think about it, because in the long run, it's the fate of this community that you're putting on the line, not the fate of Skidaway Island. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Evans? Thank you, sir.
That means nobody else has to talk, right?
I have a speaker card for Patrick Breslin. If you would, sir, please state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes as well.
Good afternoon. Thank you for your time. I am Patrick Breslin. I am a resident of the Moon River section of the Landings, right across the street from Green Island Road. I have one major concern. It may not be the purview of this governmental body, but some governmental body needs to look at, please, the evacuation concerns in the event of a hurricane or any other kind of event where we need to move large numbers of people off that island. There's only one lane on the way out, and moving older people who may be bedridden is slower than moving the able-bodied. And that's my only comment.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Breslin? Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for Mr. Jeremy, is it Merklinger?
Very close. Say it fast and say it right. Merklinger.
I won't try to say it 5 times, sir. Mr. Merklinger, if you would, sir, please state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Jeremy Merklinger. I'm a resident of South Harbor, and more specifically, I own the land that abuts or adjoins Green Island Road and are directly across the way. So I'd like to start by saying thank you to Stephen. I appreciate the history of the island. And I think the history of that island and his history is one that we want to preserve. And it's an affront to me to talk about your history and how great it is and then want to change what's out there. So I think that's what I want to bring it back to, is they're asking for variances. And a variance that, like I said, countermands what Stephen talks about, the bucolic nature of the island. Also want to quickly point out, Harold Yellen talked about a Publix and other things that could be there. I would ask you to look at your PUDR, and the PUDR talks about, I believe it's no more than 3% of the entirety could go to that use, and 20% maybe. So in practice, there wouldn't be a Publix out there. That's not an accurate statement. And I think it's disingenuous to continually tell you and share with us that we're the better option. It sounds more like me, they're telling us to go with the devil we know than the devil we don't, rather than telling me I'm better than what could be out there. And it's insulting to think that. I think what they should do is be held to the standard that's in place. And that's all I'm asking. We have a parking standard. And I don't know, I may be incorrect in saying this, but I think it's worthy to bring up. I wasn't at the other meeting, but there was discussion about golf cart versus car parking. I would ask staff to maybe bring that up, if it's car parking or golf cart parking we're talking about. And quite simply, all I ask is that they follow the rules that are in place. I don't think that's a lot to ask.
Any questions of Mr. Merklinger? There being none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Have a speaker. I hope we get a clap when this is over with, too.
You might.
Never happened.
Don't count it.
Never happened. Forget it.
This is a thankless job some days.
That's what it is.
Have a speaker for Deborah Conway. If you would, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Is there any way I can get a site map and a pointer? Thank you. I'm Deborah Conway. I live on 222 Green Island Road, and I will show you on the property map where my property is with respect to this property.
Stand in the microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. I'm short. I bought this property a year ago, and when I bought it, I had no idea that the woods next to me would ever be zoned for a 24/7 healthcare facility, tall buildings, that sort of thing, when I looked around at the other properties around me. No, the other one, their site map, if you have it. I'll move on. There it is. That's the one. Is this a pointer? So this is my property here. So I have a huge amount of my property that touches their property. And this is a 50-foot buffer. There's 150 feet on the other side for whoever owns that property, but all I get is a 50-foot. I walk that property every day. You can see through those trees. This is not like thick, dense forest. This is trees that will lose their leaves in the winter, and I'll be able to see everything this entire length of my property. So I'm very concerned about the buffer, the differential buffer between this side and me. I think it would negatively impact my property value. Other things that's very natural out there, there are actually 3 bald eagles that regularly visit. I have a large pond that's about a 1.5 acre pond in that property, and they visit it multiple times a month. It's very common, actually. And so I talked to people in the DNR. Other people have done that as well. I got a letter from Sarah Henson. She said that the DNR does plan to survey the site for eagle nests and activity, but they haven't had the time to do so yet. So I just wanted to point that out. Natural wildlife, tons of natural wildlife. Where's all that going to go when you just clear cut this whole 30-plus acres? And finally, if the zoning does hold, how do we challenge it?
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Conway? Thank you, Ms. Conway. I have a speaker card for a Joanne Jenkins. Ms. Jenkins, if you would please step forward, state your name for the record, and ma'am, you have 2 minutes.
I just want to make one comment, and that is that I think this project has been very well thought out. And I trust the developer immensely. He has done a beautiful job with South Harbor, and I believe that we would be far worse off with the number of single-family homes in there or condominiums. So I am for the project. I think I would have preferred everything to stay green forever, but if that were the case, we wouldn't have South Harbor, we wouldn't have the landings, and we wouldn't have Modena. So development is just part of life, and I think that they've done a beautiful job with the design of this one. Thank you,
Ms. Jenkins. Any questions of Ms. Jenkins? Thank you, ma'am. A speaker card for Mr. Ken Mengelsdorf. If you would, sir, please state your name for the record.
Ken Mangelsdorf. I would like to thank the committee for allowing me to speak and also ask you to please listen to the residents and the request of them as well as myself. I live at 226 Green Island Road that additionally abuts the property on the north side with the 50-foot buffer. I live towards the rear of the property, and my view will essentially be the large buildings. And I'm completely opposed to this. I don't feel this is appropriate for the zoning nor the original intention of the land use. I think we are on a residential end of the island. I think we have our commercial side. We have 2 other assisted living facilities already under construction and in place. And I feel it would be in the interest of all the residents and neighbors around us to see this development stay residential and not have a commercial entity, large facility in there. And I just would like to ask you to please consider the ramification of this development. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions, Mr. Mingelsdorf? Mr. Welch has a question, sir.
I got a question, Mr. Mangelsdorf. During recent storms in the last 3 or 4 years, such as Hurricane Matthew, when there's a storm surge, how does that affect you say you're in the back of the property closest to the marsh, I assume?
Yes.
Do you have a dock?
I do.
How does that storm surge affect you? How far up does it come into your yard?
Well, I'm very concerned about that. I asked a lot of questions at our neighborhood meeting about the flood impact because I've got my home and a vacant piece of property next to it that isn't developed yet. And when we did get that flooding, that water completely backed all the way up into the lot, into the wooded area, and all the way up into my backyard. It was very close to coming into the home. So I did have a lot of questions for the Thomas and Hutton engineer regarding that and worried about the mitigation, how they're going to fill and prevent the flooding, and what's going to happen when all of that land is raised for all of these buildings. Where's that water going to go to, and how will I be protected?
Thank you. That was one of my concerns.
Any additional questions, Mr. Mingelsdorf? Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for a Lynn, is it Whelan? If you would, ma'am, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name, excuse me, is Lynn Wheeland. I'm a long-term resident of South Harbor. Thank you all for being here today. I know it's a super long day for you. I would like, in your packet, you have a sheet that looks like this. I'm sorry I did not get it in time, but it's sort of an alternate view of the intersection than what Mr. Lotson posted. And I'm referencing, first of all, the first photo. This photo shows the approach to Green Island Road heading into the main gate of the landings. As you can see, unlike McWhorter that has a merge lane, Green Island Road does not have a merge lane off of Diamond Causeway or a right-hand turn lane. The right-hand lane of Diamond Causeway serves as the main conduit or entry point for the vast majority of landings residents that have RFID decals on their car. They use the right-hand lane to queue up to go in so they don't have to go stop at the guard. They just go into the automatic gate. That lane also serves if you have a frequent visitor pass, you have an RFID. If you're a service contractor, you're probably going to use that lane. The left lane is reserved for those that need to stop at the guard gate. Is that it?
27 seconds left.
we're going to have a significant traffic impact at that four-way stop. So what's going to happen? It's going to back up the landings, and you're going to get the traffic according effect, and it's going to back up between the next two lights. And also, Green Island Road is a smaller county road that uses ditch and swale system, and there's a significant slope. It's dangerous.
Thank you, Ms. Wheeler. Any questions of Ms. Wheeler? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
I have a speaker card for a Susan, is it Millen or Miller? Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. That's the spirit. I have a speaker card for Katie Joyner. If you would, ma'am, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Hey there, Chairman and board members. My name is Katie Joyner. I am a South Harbor resident. Last Tuesday, May 7th, I put out a petition for the opposition of this. The title of this petition was Oppose Proposed Assisted Independent Living and Memory Care Development on Green Island Road. The following is how it was stated. We want to express our serious concern and opposition with the proposed development of an assisted independent living and memory care facility on Green Island Road. As a resident of Skidaway Island, whose property backs up to Green Island Road, the additional traffic, noise, and congestion this development will bring to the area from future residents, staff, deliveries, and increased emergency services will have a serious detrimental impact on existing property values and is incongruous with the surrounding existing land uses. The proposed facility would require 24-hour operation, requiring traffic ingress and egress to the area in an all-residential area at the end of a long dead-end road. This would further stress the four-way stop at the termination of Diamond Causeway, Green Island Road, and McWhirter Drive, which is a notoriously dangerous intersection with its current level of traffic. This increase in noise and traffic would impact the quality of life for myself, my family, my neighbors, and my community. I strongly oppose this commercial development in an otherwise residential area. As of 1:30 p.m. today, we had 1,063 signatures for this petition and many other comments in opposition for this development. Obviously, I stand before you in opposition for this development that is literally in my backyard. I bought this property, built my house, and decided to raise my children on Skidaway Island. Because of the quiet, serene, well-preserved land and neighborhood, now I have the possibility of a commercial facility within 300 feet of my home. Green Island Road is approximately 100 feet from my back door. Thank you. I recommend the board votes to deny.
You have that document that you read?
I'm sorry? Yes.
The document that you read with those names, do we have that in our record?
I'm not sure if you have the updated.
We do have it?
I emailed you the most recent this morning.
I just want it as a part of our record,
He
that's
has
all.
the 1,022 that was this morning before I left.
Thank you so much, Ms. Joyner. Any questions of Ms. Joyner? Thank you, Ms. Joyner, so much. I have a speaker card for, is it Emily Miller? If you would, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name's Emily Miller, and I'm a resident of Skidaway Island. And I just want to bring 2 unresolved issues to your attention. One is water, and the other is traffic. Thrive is not yet open. We don't yet know what the impact is going to be on our limited, by the state, water that we can draw from the aquifer, or on our traffic, which is already bad. If we have an accident on the causeway, it can take 2 hours to get off the island. I really think that another major commercial development on the island is something that should be considered very carefully in light of the fact that we don't have unlimited water and we don't have particularly good roads. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any questions of Ms. Miller? Thank you, Ms. Miller. I have a card for a Miss Claire, is it March or Marriage?
It's marriage.
Marriage. Thank you, ma'am. If you would please state your name for the record, you have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, I'm Claire Marich. I reside at 190 Green Island Road with my husband and 2 dogs. And that is really an issue in that when you look at the context of this neighborhood, this is not an overly developed neighborhood. If you would take the 30 acres where I sit in the middle, right in the middle of 30 acres on my side of Green Island Road, there are 5 homes and 12 residents. So we're talking about perhaps a development that by law, by zoning, although I challenge the appropriateness of a high acuity nursing care facility for memory care being consistent with the spirit of residential zoning. I would say that my 2 main concerns are stakeholders would be humans and the environment. I'm very concerned about these variances because from the water and from the landings, we're talking about an unprecedented towering behemoth of a building butting up into the marsh, which brings up the water and the environment. The flooding in our area after Irma, we had easily 100 yards of water that washed into our yards. And if you clear cut and pave this area that's already in a questionable flood zone, what is that going to do to the marshes, to the wildlife that need flight patterns and water? And I would just encourage you to vote no on these variances and really consider if this is in keeping with the area and the goals of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marriage. Any questions of Ms. Marriage? Thank you, ma'am. I have a speaker card for Justin Redmond. If you would, please step forward, state your name for the record, and sir, you have 2 minutes as well.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. My name is Justin Redmond, and I live in South Harbor with my wife, Jennifer, and our 3 children, where we're building a permanent home. So we're also Landings Club members and frequently use that facility. I'll try to summarize my points here because I had a lot. I'm also a business owner in the community. I have an engineering and development background as well. So when I first heard about this, I went to my consultants and actually pulled some traffic engineering data. I really feel like this development is a better use of this property than some of the alternatives from a traffic count perspective. And I would ask that a traffic study be performed to confirm that. But I do believe it'll be less than half of what an alternate facility with single family would produce. I also consulted with my attorney, and I'm concerned that this is entitled property and these other uses would be permitted. And then if we drive up the cost of developing the site, it'll lead to more density in the final approval and potentially cost the county more money in the process if they're successful. So my concern is really through mitigation, and I'd like to ask that the committee consider mitigation to help with the impact of the development. I think we need a cart path down Green Island Road. I think that we should ask the developer to restrict construction hours to those at South Harbor, the adjacent community. I'd like to see a solid wood fence or something similar to help alleviate noise, and I think a noise study should be conducted. And I think that we should reduce the speed limit on Green Island Road to account for loaded dump trucks. It's currently 50 miles an hour, which is pretty fast for most of the residents in the area. I do think that Stephen has a very, very strong vested interest in the local community, and I think that we're fortunate to have somebody who would only hurt his own property value across the street if he did anything that was out of keeping with the area. This isn't my first choice either. Like a lot of the residents here, I share the same concerns, but would ask that you approve this.
Any questions of Mr. Redmond? Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for Mr. James Lane. If you would, sir, step forward, state your name, and you have 2 minutes as well.
My name is James Lane. I live in South Harbor. My concern is safety. For children, there's a lot of bicycles, golf carts being rode down at the end of Green Island Road. But the biggest concern is devaluation of property. The bottom line, this is rental property, and the people behind there, it slowly devalue and go inward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions of Mr. Lane? Thank you, sir. Have a speaker card for Mr. Jack Robertson. If you would, sir, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
My name's Jack Robertson. I live at 214 Green Island Road. My house is about 300 feet from the subject property, so I can see this property every day from my house, front yard, backyard, driveway, etc. Simply stated, this property is not zoned properly for a senior citizen congregate housing facility being proposed on the southeast portion of the property. I'm not disputing it is zoned properly for the cottages in front of the senior citizen congregate housing facility. The property is zoned PUD under this PUDR. Under this zoning district definition, it does not state anywhere that a senior citizen congregate housing facility is allowed. However, under zoning PUD-M, in the definition, it clearly states, and I quote, a planned multifamily zoning district of 3 acres or more consisting of townhouses, apartments, condominiums, single-family detached, single-family semi-detached, duplexes, and senior citizen congregate housing. It's clearly stated. This does not leave it open for any misinterpretation. I would like to note that on April 2nd, you had an amendment to a master plan come before you for a designated land use for a church or school in Berwick so that the petitioner could build a congregate care facility. Mr. Yellen also represented this petitioner. Both Mr. Yellen and Mr. Lotson, in their statements, indicated what a congregate care facility consists of. They said memory care, assisted living, and independent care. This is exactly what the petitioner is wanting to do on the southeast portion of the property. You agreed to change this property designated from a church or school to an institutional zoning designation so that a congregate care facility could be built. On April 25th, 2017, you had a rezoning request located at 9136 Old Montgomery, known as Harmony, so that a congregate care facility could be built on that property. You rezoned this to allow 11 units per net acre so that a congregate care facility could be built. It has Hess Elementary School and the Truman Parkway and a church surrounding it. There are 2 congregate care facilities located on...
Time, sir. Would you like that to be a part of the record?
I have notes all over it. I can send it later, though.
Okay, please do. Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Robertson? No question, Mr. Robertson. I have another speaker card for, is it, last name is Kelly. I can't make out, is it Diane? If you would, please step forward, state your name for the record, and ma'am, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Ann Kelly, and
Ann,
thank you for letting us speak here today. My biggest concern is that when you examine the documents associated with this development, please look at the details, because I've heard several times already.
Get closer to the mic.
I heard several times that there's staff, the people that are going to staff this during the day would be 30 people. But is that just the nursing facility staff? Well, I can't call them nursing facilities because there's no nurses there. But then you have hospital, you have the restaurants, you have the beauty care, you have the bars, you have the pool, you have the recreational facilities. And I'm just wondering how you have 50 memory care and 60 assisted living with 30 staff. I wonder if the numbers don't add up to me. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. Also, let me just say something about the parking and the traffic. There was a reason everybody chuckled when they said there wouldn't be traffic or parking wouldn't be an issue, because you have double the people. You have the visitors coming in. You have the staff that is at least 3 shifts going on. You have the food prep people coming and going. You have a lot of traffic that's associated, that's non-residential traffic that's associated with this project. So I hope you consider all the details for this plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. Any questions, Ms. Kelly? Thank you, ma'am. I have a speaker card for a Carol Is it Blair or Blaine? Blaine. Thank you, Ms. Blaine. If you would please state your name for the record.
My name is Carol Blank. I live, excuse me, I live in the Landings, and everything that I've heard so far has been on my list as far as questions and concern. And with Ann Kelly, what she said was very appropriate. You know, I always have a thing about you cannot unring the bell. This is a very, very important decision. It's a very serious decision, and I appreciate Mr. Loughborough wanting to build the facility along with a partner. But the reason I moved to the Landings was specifically because of the bucolic atmosphere, single-family living. There are townhouses, and as was stated earlier as well, we do have facilities for senior citizens. We have it not only on the island, but we have it off island. There's a saturation, and there also is a big, deep concern about the marshland. And I've gone through, I heard there were no hurricanes in 100 years or 75 years. Had two. There's an impact. My property happens to abut Green Island Road. And just the way it is now, there's traffic noise because there was building being done at Moon River, and it continues to be. It's part of growth. I understand that, but there's dump trucks, 55 mile per hour, and with the Loughborough, with this phasing in, phasing out, there could be an impact for the next 4 or 5 years, and you know, and it does decline property values. So I really can't add a lot to it, but I do appreciate everybody listening to it.
Any
Thank
questions for Ms. Blaine? Thank you, ma'am. I have a speaker card for Mike Lindsay. If you would, sir, please step forward, state your name for the record, and you, sir, have 2 minutes.
Hello, Mike Lindsay. I'm a resident of the Skidaway Island. Just wanted to add really to some of the other points, which is the main premise of this decision is should this zoning be consistent with commercial use? And it looks like that there's an interpretation here that it shouldn't be. And based upon the area of the island that we're talking about here, if this was zoned originally for a commercial property like this, I think it was zoned improperly. So we should consider that as whether there is a reason to go forward with this based upon that premise. Finally, also I wanted to add to Mr. Lacey Manigo?
Yes, sir.
Mango? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You mentioned that anything that would be built that would not be recommended by the neighbors would not be recommended to go forward. And I agree with that, and I just want to endorse that for this decision as well.
That's only my opinion, sir.
Thank you.
Any questions, Mr. Lindsay? I have a speaker card for Robin Clark. If you would, ma'am, please state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Robin Clark from the Landings, and I appreciate you allowing us to speak. A few things, I attended the meeting last Tuesday, and a few things came up. The one gentleman was trying to sell us, I guess, but he stated that this facility would be like the one in Bluffton, but on steroids. So I didn't know whether he didn't know his audience, but I found that quite interesting. There also that was mentioned was there was going to be a clinic there, and if I misheard it, I apologize, but that the clinic would be open to people outside of that complex. So that's a little troublesome. My final, there was a question brought up that really wasn't a question, more a statement. It's about harmony on the island. And I'm going to get emotional because we just went through a big incorporation vote that divided the island greatly. But I'll tell you, there's one thing that has united us, and that is we do not want this kind of building. And if we talk about harmony and peace and quiet, I just moved here 3.5 years ago. And like she said about the 100-year hurricane, I had a hurricane, a couple tropical storms, the incorporation vote, and then this. I don't want to be an activist. I want to be watching birds and enjoying my life here. And I hope that you really consider what people said here, with that vote of 1,000, it could have easily been more if more people were on social media, but I implore you to please, please, let us have some peace and quiet, at least for another year or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. I guess we have no questions of Ms. Clark. I have a speaker card for Malcolm Harbison. If you would, sir, please step forward. State your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes. There you are.
I'm Malcolm Harbison, a lifelong resident of Savannah, raised on Isle of Hope, and spent also much of my boyhood days fishing the rivers and skiing around Isle of Hope and Skidaway Island, and also hunting on Skidaway Island, and know the island from its complete raw state. My wife and I moved to South Harbor about 15 years ago from Isle of Hope, and felt that we liked particularly the low density and low traffic of Green Island Road area, and how it was carefully protected and low, I said low density, and owner residents. And we are strongly opposed to the whole idea of changing the nature of this particular piece of property, a pretty good sized chunk, to rental property. And so that's kind of a statement I have. And my question that I had earlier was to Mr. Yellen, and I might be able to see somewhat of the answer, but I want to ask it. He stated 30 professional, I guess he meant nursing staff. At the meeting at the Lutheran Church last week, it was stated by the developer's representative that there would be 100 nursing staff over a 24-hour period, and not 30. So I want to clarify this. I don't know just how this breaks down. But also, there will also be other professional staff for things like barbers, haircutters, food service, pool service, and landscape, and possibly more.
Thank you, Mr. Harbison. Any questions, Mr. Harbison? Thank you. I have a speaker card for Judith. Is it Hildebrand? If you would, ma'am, please step forward. State your name for the record.
Judith Hildebrand.
You have 2 minutes.
Resident of the Landings. As geriatrician, I'd like you to be aware that in addition to the people that are going to inhabit this proposed development, there will be, as they are attempting to age in place, various services coming in, nurses to check, doctors to make home calls, home physical therapy, all of that, as well as hiring of people to do their day-to-day cooking, cleaning, shopping, etc. There will be a lot of traffic in and out of this development and parking required. Thank you.
Any questions, Ms. Hildebrand? Thank you, ma'am. I have a speaker card for a Joseph, is it Ram? Rahimi. Thank you, sir.
From my perspective, the issue is density.
Please state your name for the record, sir, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay, my name is Joseph Rahimi, and from my perspective, the issue is density. I mean, I think there is speculative argument about how this property can be utilized for more dense structures. And I think while legally, maybe from an aesthetic perspective, I don't think you can go ahead and put 250 units on this property and sell it. So they are trying to go ahead and put as dense of a unit or a development as possible. And frankly, that density will have an effect. I live in the Landings, and the Landings Association tells us not to flush our toilets. If it's mellow, if it's yellow, let it mellow, is what they say. We can't water our lawn sometimes. And they're going to add 250 units. If you guys are inclined to go ahead and grant this, I would ask that no variances be issued, and that includes variances on parking. If you allow just the regular parking that should be for this facility, the structure of this will change. I will finish by saying that anybody that lives in the city of Savannah knows that things can go wrong, and anybody who lives in the Savannah area knows that branches fall and hurt people. If something happens and this company can't maintain this facility, the lack of parking is going to be detrimental, and this will become a Landings problem, not a Chatham County problem. I would like that to be considered as well in the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rahimi. Any questions of him? Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, sir. I have a card for a Keishu Low.
Everything else is fine.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a speaker card for a Dan Scarborough. If you would, sir, please step forward and state your name for the record. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dan Scarborough, and I live in South Harbor. My main concerns around parking, I'm looking at the 432 units that are required by code, and of which we're only seeing a 286 total. And I don't think this addresses not only the memory care, but when you're looking at all the other individual businesses that are going to be on site that we're told we're on site, like like management of the facilities, you have housekeeping, you have engineering, you have in maintenance, you have a beauty salon, restaurant, bar, a health clinic, and a gym and a pool. There's going to be several employees at each one of these facilities within this main facility, and I think the size of it is important as well, because when you look at it, it's roughly the size of a hotel downtown, which you're looking at the Hampton Inn. There's 147 rooms on Bay Street. Marriott Springhill Suites, there's 160 rooms. You're talking about more rooms in this type of facilities that have more features such as refrigerators and bathrooms and full kitchens, and so it's going to be a larger facility than a hotel. So it's going to require the same amount of staff to support all this. So if you look at the amount of parking that would be added by that support staff, in addition to the 432 spaces that are required by the current code, and you add all those up, it's over like 480, 500, depending on how you calculate it. But it's quite concerning that's a potential when, there's the talk of only 233 or 286 spaces. It just doesn't make any sense, doesn't add up to me.
Any questions of Mr. Scarborough? Thank you, sir. I have a speaker card for Bob. Is it Rogan? Rogers, okay. Thank you. I apologize. Mr. Rogers, if you would, please state your name for the record, and you have 2 minutes.
Bob Rogers, I live in the Landings. There were 2 brief references to water, and I could submit to this commission that water usage is a much bigger issue than has been addressed today. I know that the Landings Association and the board right now are very worried about what the state is going to mandate in a few years when they change the allowed daily limit. They're very worried that the requirement will be that they will be forced to spend millions of dollars to get access to water either from Savannah, from tertiary treatment, whatever else. Millions of dollars, which everyone in this room is going to be responsible for. It's not a fact, but it needs to be pursued by this commission to understand how much is used today. Thrive is not online yet. This is a very dense facility which will add to that, and there are ramifications for that 5 years from now. Thank you.
Any questions of Mr. Rogers? Thank you, sir. The chair will now entertain a motion. I'm sorry, Mr. Yellen.
Thank you.
I'm just ready to push you out the front door.
I can tell.
I apologize.
Just very quickly, because there were a number of comments made, and I appreciate all the comments that were made by the folks behind me. They seem to have fallen into 3 categories, and I'll address them very quickly. On the issue of zoning, because we do submit to all of you that this is a site plan issue, not a zoning. There was a comment that this can only be used 3% for commercial. I've read the PUDR, I've read the environmental overlay. I'm not familiar with that rule. Maybe staff is. I'm ready to learn at any time, and I've been wrong before, so I'll meet with the gentleman who made the comment, but we're not aware of any such limitation. There was a comment about Berwick and Old Montgomery, and I'm glad someone brought that up, because Berwick was a master plan that needed to be revised in order to allow this facility. And so we put on the master plan to be developed as assisted living, independent living, and memory care, because the Chatham County ordinance doesn't allow for any of those uses. That's why we came before you and inserted those very classifications, because they don't exist. On the old Montgomery property, which incidentally is 60 feet high, we came before you with a rezoning because it was zoned R1. We are not zoned R1. We're already zoned PUDR. Several comments, traffic and storm surge and drainage and water usage and evacuation and density. As I said in my presentation, the only way to solve all of those problems is simply to do nothing. And I'm afraid that doing nothing is simply not a viable option. Last but not least, there is a petition before you, and I am very mindful of the power of social media, as we should all be. Social media is powerful, but it should not be powerful to the point that it takes away property rights from property owners. And I would like to close on that. We thank you for your time. We know this is not an easy petition, but we thank you for your consideration of what we perceive as being a site plan review. Thank you.
I apologize for the oversight, Mr. Yellen. Any questions of Mr. Yellen? Thank you. The chair, thank you, Mr. Yellen. Anything further, Mr. Lotson?
No, sir.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Chair, I have a question for staff about procedure.
Ask. I'm sorry.
I'm just a little bit unfamiliar with how we're being asked to consider these variances. To me, I would have thought that it would have been the proper course, of course, to have the general development plan before us, but for variances of this sort to go through the Chatham County Zoning Board of Appeals, and I was hoping you could explain that a little bit.
Commissioner Branch, the process, because this is a site plan that's being asked to be approved through the PUDR zoning classification, is required to come before you. Within that process, the petitioner may request variances in the development plan review. Had they been just asking for variance, not associated with the site plan, they could have chosen to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals, which can review and approve variances to dimensional standards within the zoning ordinance. That would not have approved a site plan. That would only have approved variances had they taken that route.
Okay.
Anything further, Mr. Branch?
That's all.
Mr. Welch?
Are we in discussion?
No, he asked a question of staff prior to me going into motion. The chair will not entertain a motion.
So we're not going to have discussion?
You have discussion after motion.
Always.
The chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to not accept this plan without further looking into the zoning. I think we all understand what a PUDR is and its definition. And my motion is to table this for further investigation into.
I heard a bifurcated motion. Staff recommendation was to deny the 10-foot variance. What say you to that, sir?
On the table.
Is your motion to deny?
No. Yes, my motion is to deny the 10-foot variance.
And with respect to staff recommends approval of proposed parking standards. I'm asking for clarification of your motion.
I make a motion to deny the 10-foot variance and to have further review into the parking situation for this project.
I'll second it.
Let me make sure I got this right, because I'm a bit confused.
It's been a long day.
Your motion is to accept staff's recommendation to deny the 10-foot variance for the height. And your motion is to deny the approval of the proposed parking standards.
Correct. Right.
Would you restate the motion?
But
that was not his motion.
That's not what he
His
said.
motion was to table the parking until additional information. That was his motion.
Right. So I want to get it right. Your motion is to accept staff's recommendation to deny
Of the
and to
10-foot
table the parking until further investigation.
Correct.
Got it.
Chairman.
Point of clarification?
But the point.
Oh, one second.
Is there a second?
One second. You made a motion, clarified it. Mr. Manigo
I seconded
seconded
the
it.
motion already.
Discussion. Does that include approval of the general development plan with denial of those?
Correct.
Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly
Mr.
what's
Welch?
happening.
And that's what I was getting there. Thank you.
We are not approving the original development plan.
Clarification.
That's what I'm looking for clarification on.
Yes, as well. I understand that.
So, to understand, if this were to be passed under his motion, then they could build within the height and they add parking, whether they do away with 2 buildings, whatever. It can still go in, bring it down, put more parking. That's what the motion was.
No,
No,
it's not.
no, it's
His
not.
motion was to table it.
To table it.
Back up. The motion was to table the parking. The motion was to table the parking. Now, let me, one second.
Okay.
Mr. Welch, as I understand, it's your desire to have a motion to table the entire matter.
I want to table the entire project.
So would you kindly withdraw your original
I
motion
will withdraw my original motion
and make a second motion?
and make a second motion
And that motion is?
to table this whole project until we can get together, have a clear understanding. I want a better definition of PUDR. I'd like to appeal the zoning administration's decision to the BZA.
Is that within our purview to appeal the zoning? It is. Okay.
Somebody else has to appeal.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I can.
They agree that it should be
There you
in
go.
that zoning plan.
Okay.
Only to appeal it, that's.
Motion has been made by Mr. Welch and
I'll second it again.
properly seconded by Mr. Manigo. Discussion.
Just as a point for the public to understand, with regards to the zoning, that's not a decision that we're making. That's something that could be appealed to the county zoning administrator.
That's correct.
Right.
So that's not anything that we have any purview over.
Correct.
That's true.
Any further discussion?
This tables the whole general development plan.
Yes, sir.
Is there a period of time?
Yeah, is it time or date certain?
Can,
60
which would be
days.
90 days?
Let me, Miss Wilson. Mr. Smith made a valid point
Yes, sir.
about not it being indefinite.
Actually, that was one of the things I was going to say, is we need to come up with a definitive time. But the other piece of this is, as well, just so that we all understand for staff, it is my understanding that you would like to appeal the zoning administrator's decision to the Board of Zoning Appeals for the county, so that they make a determination as to whether the zoning administrator's interpretation is correct. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's what I understood Mr. Welch to say.
I mean, so I just wanted to get clarification on that, because that's what I thought that I heard you say.
Correct.
If that is the case, then I need to find out when the deadlines are so that we can have a definitive time. And if you can give me 1 minute, we can ask staff to look at that.
Much time is needed.
Mr. Chairman.
Can I ask a question? And maybe I'm missing something. I thought we only had purview over 2 items today, is what I had in my mind when we came in here. One was height and one was parking. Is that, and the general development. So, in the time that I've been on this board and served on Zoning Board of Appeals, when they met the guidelines, they were within the height and they were within the parking. The general development plan, I can't remember a time when it did not go through. So I just want everyone to understand that there's 2 issues here, and one is we're really only talking about 2 things. And I understand where you're coming from as far as questioning the validity of the determination from the zoning administrator. But,
Ms. Wilson?
Yes, ma'am.
I just found out from talking with staff, I think when we started this process I was under the impression that the county zoning administrator had issued an opinion that this use would be allowed under the zoning class, which is normally what would happen. A letter would be written, it would be sent to the applicant with regards to his determination that that's where this fits. I have since found out from staff that we don't have that letter. So, because we don't have that letter, you know, I think it makes sense for us just to maybe, if possible, to determine, table for 30 days so that we can get clarification as to what the final next steps are, because we don't have, or you could make a decision based on what was presented right now. So from where I sit, your two options are, you can make a decision on what was presented at this point, or you could wait until we get a letter so that if there is something to appeal, you've got something to appeal, or it might just go automatically to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a determination of use.
Did he leave?
He did leave. That's why I was hoping he was still here, because, but he left. So, in light of that,
He was excused by me.
okay. So, in light of that, I'm just saying.
He's sick.
In light of that, I'm just saying that we need to get final clarification, because I think that we all heard today that there were a number of issues. One was the determination of the use. The zoning administrator made the determination that the use was appropriate. That's why this application moved forward. The second issue is that in that determination, and because it moved forward, we ended up with two issues. One was a variance request for height, which is what you're determining, and the second is a variance request for parking, based on what the information is that was submitted to us. So that's where we stand right now. You can either continue it for 30 days to get a letter, or to ask that the use be sent to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a determination, or you can vote on what you've got right now, which are the two variances based on the motion that was made to either approve the staff request, approve the staff recommendation, and to table the parking issue, because that's the third issue, which is whether the parking information that was submitted is valid based on how the property is going to be used.
Yes, Mr. Smith, followed by Mr. Coles.
What I would like to do, and I know we've got a motion and a second on the floor, if the gentleman would allow that we table until the next regular meeting, and I will order the county attorney to give a legal opinion as to not only the zoning administrator's participation in what he can and cannot do, but also on the issue of the unheard things as far as what's not there, what you can or cannot do. As Mr. Yellen has said, it is silent. So I want an opinion on that also as manager, because I'm then going to have to do a report to my commissioner standing over there. And so it's got to be legal, it's got to be right. And I've got way too many questions.
Well,
and this is not critical of the development of their project. It is of the process, because also for the folks here, or Mr. Chairman, and for the developer, I don't want us to get along 5 or 6 months and go, whoop, wait a minute, there was a mistake. Let's not do that.
Yes, Mr. Welch.
And Mr. Smith, I agree with that. Thank you. I guess that's what my real concern is, the interpretation of this use.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, and I will withdraw my motion, if that's okay.
For what?
Can we do that?
What are you withdrawing?
I mean, do you want me to do that, to say?
1 second.
And table this till we talk to the county, no, to talk to the county attorney.
We have withdrawn the motion,
That was your motion.
and
To table it.
what I want to hear is,
Yep,
and I can't say, what I like to hear is a motion to continue subject to an opinion from the county.
county attorney.
The next meeting is June the 4th. So, I mean, usually you have a date, so just to let you know. So if we table it to the June 4th meeting, and that gives you plenty of time to get an interpretation from the county attorney regarding
The table, that's what we talked.
this issue.
The process.
The process that, yes, but again,
Yeah.
Make your motion, Mr. Welch.
Make my motion. Yeah, I make my motion to table this to June 4th.
Motion has been made after being properly withdrawn. Is there a second?
I'll second it again.
Second again, discussion. Yes, Mr. Coles.
One question.
You may ask.
If we're getting the letter from the county zoning administrator, can that then be appealed by the public to the zoning board of appeals?
Yes.
So the 30 days may not do anything for what we're trying to determine, but at least it...
It's the next meeting. It's not 30 days, it's the next meeting.
It's a good faith effort.
Any further discussion? Any unreadiness? Hand vote. All in favor of continuance to the next meeting, June 4th. All opposed? It's unanimous. Motion carries.